So stop what you're doing, but I'm not about to ruin anything on this Hump Day Wednesday and a glorious day. Absolutely beautiful day. And, you know, the world works in mysterious ways sometimes. And sometimes, and I think people that listen to this show, and they probably, and feel free to tell me if it's something that it wears you out. I know that I get like nostalgic and sometimes sentimental about sport and about certainly this city. And let me tell you what happened just before we came on the show today, which I think ties all of that together. About family and about sentimentality and nostalgia, but also about spring forward, if you will. I had to get up early this morning, and I'm extremely grateful to do so, and it was really a fun event. But I was asked, and am very grateful and appreciative for the folks at ECR and Java House, Splenda, SlimFast, all of the sponsors for Ed Carpenter, Alexander Rossi, and Christian Rasmussen for the upcoming Indianapolis 500. And we knew that Rasmussen and Rossi, of course, in the field, and Ed Carpenter now getting set to attempt to qualify for his 23rd Indy 500, which I believe is 60 days from today. But I got up this morning and went down on Monument Circle to the AES Indiana building, which is a staple because, as I mentioned to those folks, they have forever sponsored the Yuletide, which is a huge event for my family. And now they are sponsoring Ed Carpenter's car for the Indianapolis 500, which is a huge part of our family in Indianapolis. And so when I went down and I made mention of the fact that when I thought of the AES building and Monument Circle and just being down on the circle and everything that goes into that, you know, I think about when I was a kid growing up and going down and all the nostalgic stuff that went into it. I'd never actually been in the building before. And the race itself and the preparation for the race makes me nostalgic. And so I'm sitting there and I'm getting set to talk about Ed Carpenter, the pride of Park Tudor, and the pride of Indianapolis, being in the Indy 500 and flying the colors of AES Indiana down on the circle. And I get the alert on my phone that what we expected was a possibility became a reality. I get the alert on my phone that Ronald has been hired as the next head basketball coach of Butler University. Butler University, who, when you think about Butler, you think about Ed Carpenter specifically. He, of course, a Butler grad and a Butler guy through and through. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about the fact that we're getting ready to make this introduction into the fact that here is a staple of Central Indiana and Ed Carpenter and the Indianapolis 500 with a staple company that is like the rest of the sponsors on his car, Indiana-based. And there's something unique about this place. Probably overly esoteric about Indianapolis. And if you were not from Indianapolis, I would probably find it very odd. But we love people that love the same things we do and carry the same values that we do. And that's why it's only fitting that Butler, and I began to wonder, was it time for Butler to go outside the family? Was it time for Butler to be grateful for and aware of the opportunities placed upon it because of the Butler way, but to now go out and just cast the wide net and say, we are in the Big East. We are part of a big television contract. We have a historic venue that we play in. We're willing to put money into our resources. Let's see who's out there. Let's see if there isn't some coach that's had a lot of success somewhere that's a really good coach that isn't saying to himself, I just would like a change. And I wondered if it was time for Butler to do that. And as much as I have tremendous respect and appreciation for the coaches that have come through there since Barry Collier catapulted them into relevant Division I status. And then after, of course, his departure, Thad Matta. And then after his departure, Todd Licklider. And then after his departure, Brad Stevens. And Brandon Miller, it didn't work out for Brandon Miller and for Butler. But I really like Brandon Miller, and I loved him as a player. And as a guy, as a young man, when he was playing at Butler, I really liked him. And then Chris Holtmann. And LaVall Jordan. And, you know, it goes on, right? Thad Matta. And now here you are to Ronald Norred. And Ronald Norred, sure, is not from Indiana. You know, neither was Thad Matta. But neither, I'm not sure where Barry Collier was born and raised, but either way, those other guys, a lot, you know, Indiana ties. But either way, when it came down to it, Butler made that announcement today and did so based on exactly what I'm talking about, of all the feels that I had and being part of the unveiling of an Indiana sponsor for an Indiana driver in the Indiana Sports Showcase of the Indianapolis 500. It's about familiarity. It's about family. It's about tradition. That's a big one, tradition. And Ronald Norred is about tradition for Butler. Yes, didn't grow up in Indiana, but he got it. He came here and he got it. And if you think about the great Brad Stevens teams, Gordon Hayward was the glitz. He was the guy that was developed before your eyes and became this dynamic player that, wow, he's playing above the rim more than I would have guessed. And look at how he's like grown into his body and he can step back and shoot. He's got a first step, lottery pick. And Shelvin Mack, not from Indiana, but became an Indiana player. Good shooter, smart player. Knew when to hold him and when to fold him, so to speak, offensively. Matt Howard, absolute bulldog of a bulldog. A glue guy. Does everything you need. Gives you 20 and 10 or 5 and 8. He doesn't care. Did you win? We won? Cool. Let's go. Bloodied, making plays, putbacks. Heady, smart player, sets one of the greatest screens in the history of the NCAA tournament. And the Butler basketball teams that Brad Stevens built were essentially, even though all of those pieces that I just mentioned are really good pieces, they still were a sum that was better than the individualized parts. And nobody was more the heartbeat of that than Ronald Norred. Ronald Norred was a guy as a player, was a little undersized. A guy as a player that you look at and you look at everybody else before you look at him. You go to a game and you go, that Hayward guy, that guy's tough. He can do about everything. Look at this, Matt Howard. That guy's a bruiser inside. Great feel, great footwork. Really good footwork on the low block. Boy, that's Shelvin Mack. He can shoot. And then there's that bulldog. And I don't mean bulldog because it's Butler. I mean bulldog. Just in your grill, tough-nosed, tough player, and an extension of the coach. Keeps everybody in check, calms everybody down, and you felt better with those Butler teams when you looked down and saw Ronald Norred on the floor. And Ronald Norred as a player probably typifies exactly what we anticipate of Ronald Norred as the coach. Because he's not the first guy you think of. When that job became open, Travis Steele, John Gross, Chris Holtmann, Tom Crean, all these names came to mind, and you're like, and then there's Ron Norred, who's there. Just tough. Right? Right there. And if you take someone like Brad Stevens, who I think we can all agree is one of the brilliant basketball minds of the last quarter century. And clearly, Brad Stevens knows not just talent in terms of on the floor, but he knows cerebral talent. I don't know whether Ronald Norwood is going to come to Butler and win 500 games or whether Ronald Norwood is going to come to Butler and struggle to go 500. I don't know. What I know is this. People with a much higher basketball IQ than myself believed in him from day one. There are plenty of players that Brad Stevens could have selected to come work for him within the Celtics organization. And I go back to what I've talked about, for example, with my cousin. My cousin who is now the president of a company, and my uncle started it. But when my cousin got out of school, he didn't get to just go work for that company. He went and worked a handful of years, close to probably over a half decade, strapping on boots and working out on the front lines of and in the trenches of a construction company before he moved back and worked in different areas of the family business. And Ronald Norwood did not just walk in and become an assistant coach on the bench for the Boston Celtics. He basically was brought in of, you're going to go and start and survey from different areas and move your way up. And you can look towards who Ronald Norwood was a player. You can look towards what Ronald Norwood seemed to be as a person, which is extremely likable, and try to immediately associate that Butler hired him because of all the feels, because of the sentimentality of it, because of the fact that we in Indiana look out for our own. And yes, he's not from Indiana, but he's a Butler guy, right? And we look out for our own here in Indiana. But you could also look at it and say, I'm not down here at the AES building to talk about the brilliant lighting that they do for different events on Monument Circle or talk about their commitment to the Yuletide, which is a tradition that families for generations have enjoyed in Indianapolis. I'm down here at the AES building to talk about them getting on a race car that's going to go 235 miles an hour and move forward. And Ronald Norwood, I don't think, is brought into Butler because they necessarily want to sit around and relive the glory days, per se, of when they went to back-to-back Final Fours. Ronald Norwood is brought back to Butler because of what they see and how he can move them forward. What the next thing is. He comes from the NBA ranks now. He's coached at the high school level. And he's now at the NBA level. And at the NBA level, you have to deal with a couple of things that you didn't used to have to deal with in college. Certainly you didn't have to deal with in college when Ronald Norwood was a player at Butler. You've got to deal with salary caps. You've got to deal with a guard who you need good minutes from, who has now surpassed on the playing time distribution, a guy that's making twice what he's making. You've got to deal with the egos or the bruised egos or the not knowing how a player's going to change once he gets that check, once he gets that bag, as the kids say. That didn't used to be a thing in college. It is now. And if Butler is going to compete in the Big East, it's certainly going to continue to be. So you bring in a coach that has a little bit and has seen some of how that works, and is an assistant coach in particular. Because oftentimes the assistant coach, their job is to kind of be the mediator that comes in and, you know, is the trusted voice, the counselor, if you will, while the head coach oversees other such things and makes ultimate decisions. And Norwood's had that experience. And in addition to that, when I was working in St. Louis, one of my favorite coaches, I'll say deal with, for lack of a better phrase, because it didn't work with them, but to cover. 25 years ago, a bright rising star amongst the college ranks, was the head coach at the University of Missouri. Had a great pedigree, had been a good player, had coached or played at least under a savant, genius-level coach. The Brad Stevens of his era was Mike Krzyzewski. And this young coach at Missouri that brought in this unbelievable recruiting class, the recruiting class of 2000 at the University of Missouri, not Kansas, not Illinois, not Indiana, not Ohio State, or the Michigan State, the teams of that era. University of Missouri ends up with this loaded recruiting class. And then they got there, and there was all kinds of insinuation and allegation that salary cap and money distribution might have been going on at Missouri. I don't know that that's ever the case. I don't know that that was ever proven, but it was certainly talked about a lot. And that's what made it difficult for Quinn Snyder to ever fully execute what he wanted to have as his vision at Missouri. But he was a bright coach, and he was a very good offensive coach. They had a really good, and I thought, modern offense that they were running with Wesley Stokes and Ricky Paulding and all these guys at Missouri. And Quinn Snyder ultimately, I think some of the challenges that came within the lines and the boundaries of college basketball for Quinn Snyder, who I like a great deal, proved to be too much, and he ended up in the NBA. And guess who has been one of his lieutenants the last handful of years?
Mike Bray.
Along with Mike Bray. Good call there, by the way. Ronald Norred. Ronald Norred, who's worked alongside him and seen the way Quinn Snyder. And you can look at, and I understand it. I totally understand it. You could look at the record of Utah. You could look at the record of Atlanta, the direction of either of those, and say, this guy, Quinn Snyder, really? I mean, that's it. Quinn Snyder's a good basketball coach. And there are levels about him that are a little bit neurotic, but Quinn Snyder he understands and is aware of all the different moving pieces and parts of a basketball program. And I think that's going to benefit Ronald Norred, who now is back at Butler. And again, I think the reason he's back is not necessarily because of the sentimentality and the tradition and the heritage, for example, of seeing the beautiful lights being down on Monument Circle of the AES building. It's about the partnership moving forward now and trying to get it moving at a fast pace, which is what I think Butler looks at for him and says, yes, obviously the fact that he knows the Butler way, the fact that he knows his way around, the fact that he knows where the men's room is, those are all huge assets and huge benefits. But he also knows, theoretically, how to navigate the cross-pollination now between college basketball of where it's been and college basketball and where it's going. And that's what he represents. So Norred is hired at Butler. That much we know for certain. We also know that Purdue is in San Jose, getting ready for the Sweet 16 to take on the Texas Longhorns. And Eddie Garrison, and by the way, good afternoon, Eddie Garrison. This is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. The other voice you hear is that of Eddie Garrison. Eddie, this feels like it could be the proverbial quote-unquote trap game for Purdue, right? Because I think Texas, I mean, obviously, when you get to this point, you know that you're going up against a legit foe. But at the same time, you also have to know that you have the ability to get caught up in thinking about what's next. Oh, man, we get the 11 seed. There's only one double-digit seed left. The only guy that expected Texas to be here was Gary from the numbers game because he wins himself a UT hat. And, Gary, I'll get in touch with you and get it out to you. So it's easy to get caught up in overlooking what you have there, and there's a danger in that, right? Because you automatically think to yourself, holy cow. But you would think of all programs, Purdue is one of them that realizes when you get to the Sweet 16 and you're going up against a double-digit seed, don't you count your chickens before they hatch, right?
Absolutely, Jake. And I don't think any game anymore is going to be a trap game because It's the NCAA tournament. Nobody's sneaking up on you. You're not looking forward to the next thing. You got to take care of business. What's at hand? And right now for Purdue, it's taking on a red-hot Texas Longhorns team who kind of backed their way into the tournament, forced to play in that play-in game against SMU, and then they were able to pull off an upset in back-to-back rounds of the NCAA tournament. And now they try to continue that with taking on the Boilermakers at 7 o'clock on Thursday, which is tomorrow. And by the way, you find it odd that they're playing a game in San Jose, California at 4:10 in the afternoon.
It is odd, yes. I don't know, though. I mean, you can't I guess you could with the West Regional, but if you try to put that as 7:30 on the West Coast, that would start at 10. I mean, that would get over at 1 o'clock in the morning on the East. You're trying to maximize all of your viewership, right?
Mm-hmm. The other game's at 9:45 between Pig Suey and Arkansas.
Can you do that for me one more time?
Sorry, that is Pig Suey in Arizona.
Right. Were you aware of the Pig Suey? Were you aware of that Arkansas chant before you met me?
No, not really.
That's all they do down there. And I told you, I went down to Arkansas once. I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I saw Arkansas and Baylor play, and I think it was a 9-0 or 9-6 or something football game, all field goals in the fall of 1991. And every single guy that I met was 5'7", 205 pounds, with little sausage, like Vienna sausage fingers.
But if you wanted to
Weirdest
go there,
thing ever.
Jake, about the time.
But I like Arkansas.
The headliner game for tomorrow is at 10:05.
10:05 Eastern?
Yes.
Yeah, to your point, that could easily that should probably be the West Coast start.
Uh-huh.
Although is that the West Coast start though? That would be, right?
That would be 10:05. They're playing in Houston, so was Houston an hour behind? So that's 9:05 local time?
Correct, yeah.
I mean, that's assuming they tip off at that exact time, which is it's 2 hours and 35 minutes after the tip of Nebraska and Iowa, which we know that game's going to probably take a little bit longer than usual. None of these games have really finished on time outside of the blowouts, and I don't anticipate a blowout happening between Iowa and Nebraska based off the two previous matchups.
Pacers in action tonight at the Fieldhouse taking on the Lake Show, and I'm assuming, Eddie, I have not looked at this, and I'm embarrassed by that. Luka and LeBron. I've not paid a lot of attention. I know that there's always speculation about the availability of both from whether it be injury or load management standpoint. Do we know for those two if they're both in?
In terms of the injury report right now for the Los Angeles Lakers, Adu Thero is questionable with left knee soreness. He's a role player. I think he doesn't really play much. Marcus Smart is doubtful with a right ankle injury. Rui Hachimura, questionable with a calf issue. That's it for the Lakers. LeBron, Luka, good to go.
Okay.
Pacers, Toppin, questionable. Nembhard, questionable. Nesmith, questionable. Siakam, questionable.
There is an energy. I guess that's kind of a theme today, isn't it? There is an energy about, and I have mentioned this before, but allow me to repeat it. In my time going to Pacers games, all the way back to Market Square Arena, it was a little different back in the day because in the early years, the Brown Curtain years, you went down to Pacer games because one of three reasons. Your school group got a big batch of tickets, and so you were all going. You went down to go see the Kool and the Gang concert afterwards, or you went down because they marketed it as come see Larry Bird, come see Julius Erving, come see George Gervin. And you went down to see those games. And therefore, it was an expected energy. But once the Pacers themselves got really good and it came down to it where you were going to see the Pacers and you were rooting for the Pacers and you were expecting the Pacers to win, there have only been a handful of teams or players. And I know it sounds crazy, but when you go into the building during warm-ups, kind of like when you go to a football game and they set off the pyrotechnics before the game and there's that haze that you can just kind of see on the field, the smoke that is still clearing from all of the pregame fireworks. There are certain teams or players or eras in the NBA where it's almost like you can see that haze in the air because there is an energy and a vibe of an aspect of like the Beatles or a Michael Jackson type synergy in the building of a superstardom that you're well aware of. And since the time that the Pacers have become the Pacers as the main draw, those teams, to me, and I'm taking away the Bird Celtics and the Showtime Lakers. But in the old days of wait by the bus on the ramp on the east side of Market Square to try to get some shoes from a player, in those days of Pacer games, the energy you felt were for Jordan's Bulls, and then later after that, for a brief period, the Splash Brothers Warriors, the LeBron-era Heat teams, and now for Luka and LeBron. And it was there last year when LeBron got the tip that won the game, and I presume it will be there tonight. And Kevin Bowen said it best, it's a Carmel Pups game. All the Carmel kids are down there wearing their Lakers jerseys. But at the core, they're Pacer fans as well. And that's the energy of it that will be there tonight. And look forward to it tonight. All right, when we come back, Major League Baseball, Eddie's going to be gone tomorrow. He is all fired up. I mean, all fired up. He's not planning on even sleeping. And a guy that is a part of Major League Opening Day and also has been a part of a little bit of March Madness. John Sedak's going to join us. He is the voice of the Reds. He's also part of the NCAA with Westwood One, and he is our guest next.
No pressure on entry. They've chained the inbounder. It's Condon to Lee, driving to the cup underneath. Straight in the lane, can't get a shot, and Iowa wins! A Sunshine State stunner! Iowa bounces Florida in Tampa, 73-72! The reigning champion Gators are gone! The 1 is done in the South, and the 9 is on to Sweet 16!
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Fabulous call from our next guest on the program who joins us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. That was on Westwood One, Iowa and Florida. And the man that will be, of course, on the microphone for the Cincinnati Reds as they get set tomorrow as well for opening day, joining us, John Sedak joining us on the program. John, I'll begin with this. When you hear those calls, do you think to yourself, I remember exactly what I was saying then, or do you hear it and you think, turn down the radio, I can't stand my voice and that sounds weird? Because that's how I am when I hear myself.
Probably all those things simultaneously. I mean, I can put myself back in that moment and feel it, especially because it's so fresh. It was only a few nights ago. But I also self-critically think, what could I have done differently or better? And that's part of our Moby Dick quest in this field, right? We're searching for the perfect broadcast, the perfect call that doesn't really exist, and that's part of the fun of it, the chase.
Yeah, I got news for you. Our ship sank in pursuit of our white whale like 7 years ago for this program, right? I'm well aware of that program. John, okay, I'll give you the dealer's choice, or not dealer's choice, I guess recipient's choice. Baseball or basketball, with which would you like to start?
Well, with baseball on the horizon, that's my primary gig. Let's dive into the Redlegs.
Okay, so let's go with the Redlegs because, clearly this is a team that there is a lot of hope and expectation and promise, I think, and we can get into, say, De La Cruz and the fabulous talent that he is. But I want to begin with the arms and the pitching staff. Two-part question. The first would be, how do you oversee just the health of the staff of the Reds at this point? And then secondly, is there somebody that you're looking towards saying if they can develop and be somebody in rotation that's really going to benefit Cincinnati?
Well, first on the health, I mean, the obvious is Hunter Green, who's out until it looks like at least July. That's assuming everything goes well from the loose bodies he had removed in his elbow. And that's a big loss. I mean, when Hunter is on, he is as good as anybody on this Red staff, and he's one of the best in the game. He can get strikeouts and volumes. He has shown an ability more recently to truncate his pitch total, be a little more efficient, give his team more innings. That's been his stated goal these last few years. That's a huge loss. I mean, he is a top of rotation arm that's going to be done for over half the season. And who knows when he's actually out there and stretched out and productive for this team again. That said, otherwise, they're in pretty good shape. I mean, the blister issue is a recurring factor for Nick Lodolo. That, of course, is concerning. But the good news is, for the most part, it hasn't zapped him of long stretches. That's been one of the question marks around all of these talented young arms. This is a really good staff, an excellent rotation, a very, very good bullpen that I think is a sneaky under-the-radar improvement with a lot of the ads that Nick Kroll and company made. But to this point, none of these young starters have gotten through an entire season. Nick Lodolo hasn't done it. Andrew Abbott hasn't done it. Hunter Green hasn't done it. And Rhett Lauder and Chase Burns are still in their relative infancy, as is Brandon Williamson. Brady Singer, the veteran that they acquired through trade, is the outlier who did it. But I think that depth, you can just hear how many names were rattled off initially there. They've added Jose Franco just today, who I think can project as a back of the rotation starter down the road. I assume he'll be an innings eater as a long reliever, quasi piggyback on this first turn of the rotation. Overall, the staff is in really good shape. They have a lot of depth. And I think Hunter Green, his return will probably coincide when innings thresholds would be hit by some of these younger arms. And to kind of leap from that to your second point, I think the name that opened the most eyes in spring training was Rhett Lauder. Yeah, after missing basically a year with that oblique injury, and he had shared that he was hesitant to even sneeze. That was his barometer for how healthy he was with the oblique by that point. He was slicing and dicing. Every pitch looked great, and moreover, his setup. I mean, he is a really smart, layered pitcher. He knows how to approach hitters. he shined in spring, and he profiles as a guy that I think could be particularly nasty for this Reds team. To me, that's found money because he was a bit of a question mark coming into this year. His limited big league innings from a couple of years ago looked very good, but there's always that question in that first full season when it arrives. He has more than earned a spot in this rotation, and I think he could be one of the stars that, if Reds fans weren't watching a lot of spring training, might be a little surprised by.
John, one of the things we love on this program, me in particular, I'm a huge animal guy, huge animal lover, right? Very briefly and faintly there in the background, and I have a keen ear for it because I love dogs, I heard a dog in the background. Can I guess the name of your dog?
Sure.
I'm going to go with Votto.
It is Lucky.
Oh, okay. Well, listen. That's my neighbor's dog when I was growing up was by the name of Lucky, by the way. And if it's a rescue dog, all the better. So, and all more fitting. So, if the Reds are going to be lucky this year, and I don't know that it's luck because I think we've seen that the foundation is there, right? And for Terry Francona now in year number 2, this is a guy with tons of experience in the bigs as a manager. But were there any areas that you felt like maybe he might have, and I'm going to use misplayed is for lack of a better word, but are there areas that you think Terry Francona looked at and said, I'm going to handle my ball club differently this year than in year 1 now that I have a better feel for personnel in terms of the way that I'm managing them?
Yeah, I mean, he has volunteered himself that he thought he made a mistake not sitting Ellie De La Cruz selectively from time to time. It's a noble endeavor that Ellie wants to play every game, as he did this past year. He did so while battling 2 different leg injuries that clearly impacted his speed and power. You compare his first 2+ months to the rest of the year, basically coincides with when the leg injuries first arrived. He was a very different ball player. And I think they've kind of come to a mutual conclusion. There are going to be days you're going to have to DH. Certain days you're going to sit. And assuming the right-left splits remain a bit of a bigger gap, I hope that will be slim some as right-handed stroke looked better this spring. That's probably when it makes the most sense, right? If you're facing a lefty, have him at least sit at the start. If you have a chance to win the game, you have a matchup, have him pinch hit in the 7th inning. Maybe he plays the rest of the way. Try to get a win, of course, but manage that workload on Ellie. He is a bigger dude. He has put on even a little bit more thickness, good weight, strength. You can really see it in his arms and his chest. And hopefully the biggest benefit from that is not more power. He doesn't need that. He already has plenty of pop and plenty of zip on his throws, but greater health. The muscle base can help him more. He's not, Herculean. He's not overwhelmingly jacked. He's just a little stronger from that wiry guy that he was when he first arrived. He's growing into his man body a little bit. And I also think bullpen usage. Terry Francona, you look at how he handled Cleveland, which I think is a really good mirror and parallel to this Reds team on a lot of levels. And he went heavy with his best bullpen arms. And that happened with the Reds, with Emilio Pagan and Tony Santillan, who I think were really, really good last year. And consider that Pagan was going in 4-run situations regularly, non-save. That's something that Tito has done Boston and Cleveland before. I think part of that was also just the depth of the Reds bullpen. This year's Reds bullpen, that's where the adds, Brock Burke, Caleb Ferguson will begin the year on the IL, Pierce Johnson, really talented arms, more veteran arms, more ability to mix and match and left-right match up. And I think because of that, you can cut down a little bit on the innings of those 2 guys. Now, if he's in a gotta-have-it moment, he's going to go to his best guys. And I think you want to do that, win that game, and then deal with the ramifications thereafter. But because of the options he'll have, especially as those guys, assuming they do, go out and execute and get the job done, then you probably don't see the burnout in Emilio Pagan and Tony Santillan that clearly was there when they were managed much more carefully in the last month, 5 weeks of the season.
That is the voice of John Sedak. Of course, you can see him with the Reds broadcast over the course of the year for MLB TV. All right, let's switch to basketball, where you were on the mic for Westwood 1 through and up to the Sweet 16. You had Iowa, Florida, and Alabama, Texas Tech. I'll begin with the first one. That upset of Iowa, John, at the risk of sounding elementary in the question, did that tell us more about Iowa or maybe more about what Florida did not do?
I think it's, as always, a little bit of both, right? I think Iowa had a great game plan. I think one of the things we learned from that is that Ben McCollum is a great coach. He showed it, obviously, at the Division II level, where he coached Tommy Thrall, radio voice of the Reds' alma mater, to Division II dominance for a long, long time. They know each other. They share some mutual acquaintances. They just denied the paint to Florida. And I don't know that many in the country even thought that was that possible. And they were able to do it. They were sneaky quick. I think that's something Tom Crean was on. As we saw their game plan, we were allowed access to their shoot-around. And there's a deceptive speed to their team. And they were funneling the ball to certain spots. And Florida had a really hard time adjusting to it. I'm not sure how often Florida saw that game plan with that speed and that team effectiveness during the course of the year. So I think for this year, they presented a blueprint based on this year's personnel for Florida and probably how to best handle them. And this is a Gator club that started staggered fashion, but was really tested by a tough schedule beginning 5-4, and then was on that short list of the 4 or 5 most dominant teams in America over a stretch of 25 games. But that's part of the joy of March Madness. I also think that some of the stylistic and personnel differences, SEC versus Big Ten, SEC has a lot of that explosive athleticism. It was probably a tough matchup, too, for Florida, because a lot of their perimeter players would want to just lob passes into the post for a high-low. And Iowa was positioned perfectly to deny that. And that's something Ben McCollum said repeatedly in their shoot-around. Hey, we got to pick our poison, right? We can take away something. We can't take away everything. That's what they wanted to deny, and they were able to do so at a high level. I also think Bennett Sturtz is a really talented player that goes beyond the box score. The way he can handle and manufacture tempo, they controlled the tempo of that game, which they needed to do, and did so against a gargantuan offense that was the best rebounding team America had seen in a quarter century.
I thought, I watched, and I think the world, both the way Ben McCollum coaches and then the way Texas Tech is. Texas Tech, to me, is as fundamentally sound as anybody in college basketball, and they were eviscerated by Alabama and the athleticism of the Tide. I know you had that game as well. Anybody else jump out at you that you have seen over the course of the year that you look at and say you might not hear people talking about them, but they're really impressive?
I think Iowa State does get a lot of praise, but TJ Altenberger is a tremendous coach, and Kentucky was thumping them in the early stage of that matchup to get to the Sweet 16, and I thought their ability to withstand that storm and then just deliver a haymaker to obliterate the Wildcats by a final score to set up a matchup with a Rick Barnes team that always defends. He's an excellent coach in his own right. But I think that Iowa State club is much better than a lot of people intimately understand on a national basis. And I would echo what you said about Texas Tech and Grant McCasland. I think he's a superior coach. I did think that the absence of JT Toppin finally caught up to them. And I do wonder how limited Christian Anderson was with that groin injury that he had suffered in the Big 12 tournament. Of course, they had that LED floor, and there were 2 Red Raiders went down in a very rapid-fire fashion during the course of that tournament, and then they elected to change the floor the next day. He's not really an explosive off-the-bounce guy, but he didn't quite look the same, and he does everything for them. So when you lose your best player in JT Toppin for the year with a knee injury, and then your next best player, Christian Anderson, who's the facilitator of your team, is not 100, that's true of a lot of star players in the tournament, but I think that just caught up in Alabama's good. I mean, they're really good. I think Nate Oates can coach some ball, and they can put up points. They can just outgun and outscore a lot of teams.
Lastly, Tom Crean's pretty good as an analyst, isn't he? I mean, we obviously knew him as a coach here. I didn't know him well as a person. We've had him on this radio station several times. He's always accommodating. But, man, I really enjoy listening to him. I mean, I think he's really insightful, and he appears growing very comfortable as an analyst.
I totally agree. We did his first tournament together a couple of years ago. We were set to be together last year again. He had a speaking engagement that prompted a change of his site. Then we were reunited this year. He's that way and more so even off the air as well. Because as you know, on radio, it's a tighter time to be able to get information in. We have a lot of ads, understandably so, during the NCAA tournament. He's so inclusive, so keenly observational. I loved sitting with him as teams were going through, particularly their day before the round of 32 games, true walkthroughs, and asking, what do you see? What does that mean? What do you expect? I mean, he was the first one. He kind of called Iowa, Florida. I think most people nationally just dismissed Gators by $1 billion, right? Who cares who wins the 8-9 game? They're the reigning champs. They have so much firepower. They're going to stomp whoever they play. And when he saw the game plan from Iowa, he started tilting his head, chewing on his pen, nodding a little bit. He's like, I think this can work. I really think this can work. He does his homework, and his studio work with ESPN as well gives him such a big, broad view of the country. He's able to work for a number of networks. He sees a lot of leagues, and he has a really good anticipatory feel. The guy knows basketball, and he loves sharing that knowledge.
John, appreciate it a lot. 4:10 tomorrow. We'll appreciate it as well when the Reds get underway. Of course, a great tradition. Opening day, Cincinnati, the Red Sox as well. Great tradition between both clubs, and we look forward to seeing it. It should be a good year for the Reds. Would look forward to having you back on, but I certainly appreciate the time today.
Greatest opening day in baseball. Thanks for having me. Go Reds.
That's right. John Sedak joining us from the Reds, MLB TV, and again, Westwood One as well. Ed Carpenter in about 30. And 45 minutes from now, we're going to talk to a guy that is getting the Boilers ready. Not Matt Painter, but Elliot Bloom. Always a great conversation as Purdue and Texas get set for the Sweet 16. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes with just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar. You already know about the lemonade with a splash of vodka, the refreshment of that beverage. And, of course, again, so smooth to drink without the bubbles. Or the iced tea, the variety of flavors for the iced tea. The mango tea is fabulous. Raspberry tea is great. And now a new product coming out from Surfside that is perfect for the summertime. After you're mowing the lawn or you're by the pool, whatever it may be in the hot weather, it is perfect, and you're going to love it. We'll be telling you about that coming up here in just a couple of weeks. Surfside, look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Please be 21, and please consume responsibly.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Oh, Eddie. Just taking me back, man. Styx, there's something about Styx that, in Big Daddy, they say Styx is one of the most underrated bands. And they're a little bit cheesy, but yet there's something about just his voice that, immediately takes you back. Early 80s. Eddie's spinning the hits on this Hump Day Wednesday. Ronald Norred is the new basketball coach at Butler, and he will officially be introduced on Friday, but that announcement earlier today. And a couple of things that I'll share here. When the Thad Matta thing, and I know everybody says, it just is kind of odd, right? That it was, at first it was Thad Matta's coming back, and then it's, well, no, he's going to retire. I don't know this, but my assumption would be, I think Butler did him a solid and basically said, look, you have earned the right, if you so choose to leave, to do so on your own terms. And I'm not saying that they were ready to part ways with him. But I think that they, knowing that there was the possibility that Thad Matta may retire, I think Butler put that statement out in advance of it to make it very clear so that there was no speculation about how it went down, to make it very clear to everyone that, in fact, that was Thad Matta's decision. And immediately, the name that first jumped out was Travis Steele of Miami, who is, of course, the half-brother of John Gross of Akron. And both of them have ties along the way with Thad Matta. And it seemed as though both of those were natural names, and Ronald Norris was there in the mix as well, because of the fact that he is coaching in the NBA and he's a Butler guy, and he's, just kind of a coach's coach all the way through, right? In terms of, he was a coach on the floor when he was a player.
Did you see the reporting from friend of the show, Charlie Clifford, Jake, over in Cincinnati?
Did not.
Sources that told, I think it's WOW there in Cincinnati where he's at, that Travis Steele was never pursued by Butler.
Correct. I mean, I would agree with that, and I'll tell you why. That's what I was getting to, is when initially that was the thought, was he was going to be the guy. Then, if you go back and look at it, what we talked about on the show was there was something, and I don't know whether it was the time at Xavier, and he was 70 and 50 in Xavier, but while his name jumped out initially, as I started to talk to people, more people told me he's not a candidate. And that it looked, if you think about when we had on Tom Crean, and Tom Crean, I said Gross or Norred, because it looks like Steele. Initially, that was the name everybody jumped to because they were 31 and 1 at that time. But I don't know that they're going to pursue that. And Crean seemed to kind of feel, say as well, yeah, that's what I understand. I don't know what the backstory is there, but there clearly is one as to why Butler did not pursue that. Now, John Gross, as I understand it, John Gross and Thad Matta have been close for a very long time. I'm not saying that Gross wasn't still a candidate and wasn't one that they would have gone towards, for example, if Norred wasn't, didn't have interest or they couldn't come to an agreement or whatever else. But there was a player that was being recruited by both Ohio State and Illinois. And as I understand it, I'm just the messenger here, but as I understand it, John Gross and Thad Matta, who were very close, and Thad Matta or representatives for Thad Matta at Ohio State got word that this player, and you get this a lot in recruiting, coaches start recruiting against other coaches. Now, what do you mean you have an interest in that school? Their coaches, he's not going to be there in 2 years. He's already looking to go out. There's rumor that he's talking to such and such program. Or that if this job opens up, that coach isn't going to be there. You come here, I'm going to be here all 4 years. And it is my understanding that there was a player being recruited by Ohio State and Illinois both, and that there was the insinuation that John Gross mentioned to the player in the recruiting process, look, Thad Matta's not going to be there for all 4 of your years because look at his health. He's going to walk away from coaching, and you're going to sign up for something where you're not going to be able to complete it to the end with that coach. And I'm not saying that fractured totally their relationship, but as I understand it, I do think it soured it, and they've been very close. And friendships have ebb and flow, and it's very possible those two are now as tight as can be. I don't know. But in the event that still is there, assuming that Thad Matta had some say in who his successor was going to be, I think that could be one thing also that stood in the way of John Gross landing that job. But Norred may well have been their vision from day one, and there's no doubt about the fact that Ronald Norred is the one guy out of all of them that you can mention that probably has the most mark-free resume. He's a well-liked guy. He always felt like there are certain players, Eddie, you mentioned the other day when we were talking about perfect games and no-hitters, and you said, well, you got to give credit a lot of times to the catcher. Because the catcher is kind of he's the guy seeing everything. He's calling the game. He's he anticipates a lot. And I think that there are certain basketball players, and it's usually the point guard, but there are certain players that you look at on the floor and you say, that guy is a basketball coach that happens to right now be playing basketball. And Norred always felt that way. He was always in the right spot and was very aware and was just an extension clearly of what it was that Brad Stevens wanted done, and so therefore he's in this position.
I think he brings something that Butler has needed a little bit too, Jake, and just someone who's going to instill some life, some energy into that program, because he's going to be a guy that players are going to enjoy playing for and want to play for because of the energy and the passion that he will have on the sidelines and certainly in practices as well.
And again, he comes after working with Quinn Snyder, most recently, at least in Atlanta on that bench. And Quinn Snyder is a guy that's got a pretty good basketball offensive mind in particular. And I know you can look at Quinn Snyder's record and be like, really? But I do think that he's a pretty good basketball mind. Butler, the big story today with Ronald Norred, but there were a couple of other Butler in basketball stories that were of note in Central Indiana today. We will get to that. And Elliott Bloom coming up bottom of the hour.
and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Man, a good-looking day outside. And already a busy day. Mentioned it earlier off the top of the program.
You know what it looks like outside, Jake?
Well, somebody who keeps putting these blinds down. I mean, I did when it was gray out and I didn't want to look outside, but now it's beautiful outside.
Well, see, I would always pull them up and then you would come in and pull them down because your little eyes are too sensitive to sunlight.
Well, when the snow's out there, that's why I have these beautiful blue eyes. Now, these are, I mean, as many people call them with my eyes, the moneymakers, but because they're a very gorgeous light blue, Carolina blue, really, they're more sensitive to light.
I will say that my eyes are also sensitive when I get outside.
Yeah, fair.
No, but I was going to say, it looks like a great day for baseball. That's what it looks like outside.
I picked up, so earlier this morning I got up, went down, went to the AES Indiana building where they had an announcement. It was fun. I got to moderate it. That is my number one fear in life is public speaking. So I got no sleep last night. So please, and I switched to Sanka, so have a heart. And I went down because Ed Carpenter is going to be sponsored by AES Indiana along with Slim Fast and Splenda for the Indianapolis 500, his 23rd attempt at the race. He sat on pole 3 times, of course, in his career. Ed's going to join us about 15 minutes from now. But I sat down, and 2 things. Number one, they had it sitting right there, and I went ahead and picked one up, the pocket schedule for the Indianapolis Indians. And, yeah, baseball's upon us, right?
Opening day for the Indians on Friday.
Correct.
At the Vic.
Is it going to be 60?
I don't know, actually. 3-game series against St. Paul.
Didn't Darryl Strawberry play for St. Paul? Is that a different St. Paul?
Ooh, Friday, thunderstorms, high as 65.
60 is the deal, though. It's got to be 60. You get your tickets for a later date if it's under 60 degrees. But the Butler story, here I am with Ed Carpenter, a Butler guy at AES Indiana, to announce this sponsorship and partnership for the Indy 500, and the bulletin comes across my phone right then of the Ronald Norred news. And, that, again, with Norred for Butler, that is about, I think, as much looking forward to what he represents as it is holding on to the past of where he has been with them. Matt Howard, one of his teammates, going to join us. Good get by Eddie there, coming up here in just about an hour, and we'll find out a little bit more from a guy that was, could kind of see inside huddles on the floor, inside the locker room, what kind of guy Ronald Norred is. But that happened this morning, and then, I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, it's baseball season, and the weather is just perfect outside, and it was a gorgeous morning this morning for that. And then I also love the fact that you're heading into, you got the Lake Show in town tonight, and that springboards you into tomorrow, where we will talk plenty about, while Eddie's down at Great America Ballpark, the Sweet 16 matchup in San Jose of Purdue and Texas. And Texas is one of those, I don't know a ton about Texas. Elliot will be able to give us a little more insight into that. But what I do know is this. There is a danger, and all teams have run into this since the beginning of time. I'm sure that UNLV, when they blitzed through the NCAA tournament with the largest margin of victory average margin of victory, I should say, in tournament history, eclipsing Bob Knight's 81 Indiana team, and they were blowing people out of the building. And they got to McNichols Arena in Denver against Duke in the national championship game and made a mockery of it. Beat them by 33, I think it was, in the final. Eddie, you can test my memory. I believe the final score of the 1990 NCAA championship game was either 103-70 UNLV over Duke or 103-73. But I think it was 103-70 in 1990. And that Final Four would have consisted of Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Duke, and Vegas. I'm pretty certain. With Georgia Tech, I'm trying to think here. I think that's right. Georgia Tech and Duke in one semi, and Arkansas and Vegas maybe in the other, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong.
Yep, Duke, Arkansas, Georgia Tech, UNLV.
And what was the final? Georgia Tech, UNLV. Okay, so I had that flip-flop. What was the final?
What'd you say?
Or no, it was Georgia Tech, Arkansas. Okay, 103-70 or 103-73?
103-73.
Okay. In that Sweet 16, Vegas played Ball State and Chandler Thompson and Paris McCurdy. And, that
How
entire
do
group.
you do?
Chandler Thompson, how do you do? One of the great calls. And I'm sure UNLV probably looked at Ball State, who had defeated Oregon State and Louisville, and said, yeah, okay. I mean, but, it's Ball State. No disrespect to Ball State, but you get what I'm saying, right? And that comes with, when you enter into, I think it is very easy to look past who you're playing in the regional semifinal, because you start looking towards the Final Four and what the roadmap is. You're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to play so-and-so. We're one win away from the Final Four. Well, you forget about that semifinal game. And I don't think Purdue's going to do that with Texas. Number one, there's obviously with Heidi familiarity with the Texas roster, even though he is not their leading scorer, but he's an important part of what they do. But Sean Miller has been around. He's been on kind of both sides of it. He's been the hunter in Arizona. Or the hunted, I should say, at Arizona. He's been the hunter at Xavier. And now here he is at Texas, where did not have the year that was anticipated. Probably never really got footing or stability in terms of where they wanted to be and who they wanted to be. And now it's come together for them. And maybe the play-in game in Dayton was a big part of that. I mean, maybe that's what got them centered and focused in the right direction. But it would be easy for fans, certainly, myself included, to look at Purdue and say, man, the Final Fours in Indy, the last year they played in Indy and were defeated by Houston, but really played well in that game. Houston's really good and was really good a year ago, obviously. It would be, was that last year or 2 years ago? It feels like 5 years ago when Purdue lost to Houston. That was last year, right?
It was last year because It was here.
And so therefore, you understand why it's easy to overlook it. It feels like the proverbial trap game going against the only double-digit seed left in the tournament. But as we talked about earlier in the show, kind of the theme for the day, it's not as much about dwelling in the past and holding on to it as it is racing towards the what's next while keeping in mind of or learning from things of the past. And in the case of Purdue, North Texas, Arkansas, certainly St. Peter's, Fairleigh Dickinson, that program, not this group of players per se, but that program, they have seen what happens with the pitfalls and the trap game of looking ahead and glancing past it. And I just don't think that's going to happen. But there's also a rust that can settle in when teams come off of, but that rust may be more the case for Texas, because here's Texas that had to play not one, but two, but three games to get to this point. And then all of a sudden, you shut it down for a little bit. And I'll be curious to talk, when we talk to Elliot Bloom coming up here, the director of basketball operations for Purdue, who's been on the show before. We talked to Elliot, and I will be real curious to hear just how they handle the travel. Because you come home, and then, what do you do? And that's what always, to me, where I was so cynical about the college football playoff. Well, we can't have a college football playoff because these are student athletes, and they'd be spending too much time away from class. You say that, but what about the NCAA tournament? I mean, when's the last time, honestly, that those guys were all living on campus and walking over to Mackey and having practice? I mean, good Lord, between the Big Ten tournament, turn right around, off to the NCAA tournament, turn right around, off to San Jose. I mean.
You love that.
No, I do it partially because I like the fact that, like you, when you hit me out of left field with the Hawk Tua sounder that I wasn't anticipating, I couldn't keep a straight face when you'd play it. And so I noticed that when I do that sounder, for some reason, you seem to get almost an uncomfortable childlike joy out of it.
What?
Mm-hmm. You giggle.
Okay. That's Tony East, not me.
You giggle when I do that. No, Tony does like it too. It's very popular, and kids love it. I was out the other day and just doing my own, grocery shopping, minding my own business, sorting through
getting Boo some new things for his birthday.
Yeah, I mean for the anniversary of his adoption. But I was just going through like I'd normally do, and looking through the cantaloupe and shaking them up, and finding what's fresh, right, and just doing my shopping. And somebody just came up and said, "Excuse me," and I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Do you know what it sounds like if you were to quickly go over to the deli?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it just goes." Zzz. And the little kid right there, and she said, "Johnny here knew that you were going to do that." People love it.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. And they oftentimes too, they ask about get to know your listener, because market research on that has been overwhelmingly positive, especially in the 10 and under demo, which we have a ton of that listen from 12 to 3. Now, we question whether or not, that's good parenting, because they should be in school, and certainly kids.
We're in spring break right now, Jake.
Yeah, I know. And that's why our listenership skyrockets. Kids clamor for it. I mean, a lot of kids go to spring break. They will talk about spring break or spring ball. No, not in this town. Query & Co. That's what the kids are all about. We have a ton of research that indicates this. But of the Sweet 16 matchups, I'd like to know, Eddie, for your standpoint, which game you find to be not the most intriguing, but the hardest to just get a read on, where you're like, man, this could go one of two ways. And because there's always a blowout in the Sweet 16 also, right? But is there a game or a matchup that you look towards and you say, I don't know, I can't get a firm hold on which way it's going to go?
Duke, St. John's.
Really good.
I think it's a really good matchup. Obviously, the Blue Devils are the number one overall seed in the tournament, but St. John's has looked really, really good defensively. It's going to be a matter of, are they going to be able to make enough shots against Duke? The other one that I don't have a read on per se would be Michigan State and UConn.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because one of those two, I don't know which it is between Michigan State and UConn. But if I had to pick two teams in the tournament that are the most intriguing in terms of, are they legitimate national title level contender, or are they at the ceiling like after two rounds? Both of those teams to me could be either one of them.
Yeah. In that NCAA tournament survivor pool that I'm in, Jake, that I talked about, I think it was Monday, trying to get an idea on who I should pick for tomorrow's Sweet 16, and then on Friday, I used Michigan State as one of my early picks just because it just seems like as of late with Tom Izzo, they're a team that either gets a first round or a second round exit, or they somehow make it to the Sweet 16 and threaten to make it to an Elite Eight in the Final Four.
I think Illinois-Houston is interesting as well, because
I do too.
Illinois, the way they can space and shoot, and they can shoot from anywhere. And when you have a key ball handler that's out that comes back 2/3 the way through the season, that can be, you don't know how the team is going to respond to it. And then Houston and the way they defend. And can you imagine, for you Indiana fans, I'd like to know this, and I've asked this before it was the case last year in the tournament. But if the Final Four is here in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium, who do Indiana fans root for if it's Kelvin Sampson against Purdue? I mean,
Jack Daniels, Surfside.
Surfside. That's exactly right. Joining us now on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. And again, if you're going to go into a Java House in any of their locations, 2 of them downtown, 2 in the Carmel area, 1 in Broad Ripple, many in Lafayette. Use the code JAKE25 on the Java House app that you have downloaded, and you're going to get 25% off. You know what that sounds like with the discount, Eddie? 25% off. Roaring his way to Broad Ripple right now to get that discount is Ed Carpenter, who joins us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line after an announcement today that we now know who is going to be on the car as he pilots it for what will be his 23rd Indianapolis 500 start. Ed, how are you?
I'm doing great. I haven't made it very far since I saw you this morning. I'm still down near the circle, but having a good day.
You know what? It is a good day, and that's because and tell me how this all came about. AES Indiana, who has been a part of the Indianapolis 500 before, they've been a part of the 500 Festival Parade, a number of different things, but now on the car for ECR and car 33 for you in the Indy 500. How long has this been in the works?
It was about a year-long process. They had actually reached out. As you know, they'd been a longtime partner of the 500 Festival Parade and kind of had some community involvement initiatives around that. And they're looking to do something different, but still wanted to kind of have a mark and be a part of the May activities. And they had done something years ago with Sage Karam and Brian Reinbold, and they enjoyed it and wanted to kind of venture back that direction with some of their efforts. So they had some outreach, and then over the course of the year, we put something together that I think is going to work well for everybody.
You know, one of the questions that you, and I want to get to Butler with you in a second here as well, but one of the questions that I thought was interesting when we were down with AES folks today, that was a really good question. I wanted you to expand upon it for our audience, and that is, when you're a race strategist, as you are for Alexander Rossi over the course of the year, and you are the CEO of ECR Racing, which you are for the totality of the year, and then you switch that over to now I'm going to run in the Indy 500. How do you kind of flip mentally from team manager to team player, but also opponent?
Yeah, I mean, you really just have to be disciplined in understanding what particular role you're in, whether it's, you know, me as a driver, me as, you know, the head of the team as CEO, or on race day as a strategist, because it's kind of interesting. You know, I'm responsible for a car, you know, but there's moments where, you know, we may need to work together, be it different strategies or whatever. So, you know, in moments like that, Tim Broyles, our team president, actually has authority over me, like from any team decisions. You know, so you really just have to understand kind of the dynamic and what my role is that day, because they vary depending on what I'm doing and figuratively what hat I'm wearing.
We are 60 days, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from the Indy 500. Whenever you have the unveiling of a new car and a primary or a secondary sponsor, whatever it might be, then you know that all the ducks are kind of getting in a row. At what point during the buildup of the Indy 500 does Ed Carpenter become the most nervous?
I mean, there's anticipation along the way and anxiety. I would say we'll have our open test at the end of April, which is the first time everyone shows up, and you know that's kind of our first chance to see, you know, how the development work that we've done to improve from a year ago is going to take effect in reality. It's our first gauge to measure ourselves against other teams, you know, to get a feel for kind of the balance of strength between Honda or Chevrolet, which kind of bounces around year to year. You know, so that's really when my anxiety starts to kick in of, you know, have we done good work? Have our partners done a good enough work? You know, and we certainly don't know who's going to win the race on that day, but you start to get a picture of, you know, where the competition lies.
Do you like the hire of Ronald Norred for Butler?
I do. You know, I think it's a good hire. It's a hard time to be a college coach, really anywhere, with the landscape of things. But I think keeping it in the family and bringing in Ron, who's a younger guy from, you know, having connection to the most successful era of Butler basketball that we've ever had. You know, I think he's going to be a great representative of the university and bring some energy to carry on the progress that Thad's been making over the past couple of years.
You would be a good person to both ask and know this. What makes a good leader?
You know, I think to me is, you know, it's someone that people can connect to and want to follow and go into battle with. And, you know, you can accomplish that by a lot of different styles, but at the end of the day, you know, people have to want to be with you and want to work with you and work for you. So whatever qualities that takes, you know, for whatever your discipline is, because I don't think it's always the same depending on your field, but just, don't have to be liked, but people have to believe in you.
Who's the best leader you've been around?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, I learned so much from my dad and have incorporated a lot of his qualities and leadership styles into kind of how I operate. But, there's been a lot of them, from different mentors that I've had in my life. I try to not so much look at people that I don't know, but I try to be able to emulate people that I do know and can talk to and actually directly learn from. So Tony, Bob Hillis, who's a family friend and mentor, are kind of the two that I would name.
Ed Carpenter is my guest. Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line is where you're hearing his voice. You will see him in the Indianapolis 500, his 23rd attempted qualify for the race coming up in May. Before we let you go, obviously this weekend it's Barber. I would imagine you guys are feeling pretty good because certainly in Arlington, I thought at times Christian Rasmussen had one of the better cars on track. Alexander Rossi also fought his way back in. I think a top 10, maybe even a top 8 or so for him. But you guys have to feel pretty good about it. But what challenges are there for Barber?
I think Barber is a place that we've kind of been hot and cold as a team in the past. I think over the course of last year, we made a lot of progress with our cars and road course package. So I'm excited to get back there. I know the whole team's optimistic. We've definitely proud of the start that we've had from a potential standpoint. Our pace has been strong. The guys are pretty happy with the cars. So I think we're going to be in a good spot, but we'll find out Friday morning.
By the way, I'm kind of hesitant to ask on the way out here because I don't want to know if it's bad news, but how's Gary doing?
Gary's hanging in.
Good.
Gary's still running the pond.
Yeah.
He's an amazing creature of a duck.
Gary's the duck that lives over near Ed's pond, right? And he just hangs out, right?
Yeah, he does not migrate. He has friends that come and go, but he's a fixture year-round. My parents, when we get those cold stretches where everything freezes over, we've got a little machine we put in the pond to make sure Gary has fresh water to habitat in.
That's
so
beautiful.
he's a tough duck.
What do we know the lifespan of a duck? Do we know?
I think he's exceeded it, whatever it is.
Well, he's freeloading at the right spot, right?
Yeah, he gets fed every day, in addition to whatever he can find in the wild. But yeah, he kind of does his own thing.
Eddie says 8 years is the life expectancy of a duck. What do we think Gary's at?
Let's see. I think he's 6 or 7. I want to say, maybe 8. So we're coming up on it.
He's got his ARP card.
He seems healthy. So
all right. Well, that's good. I like Gary. Gary's cool, so I was happy to hear that. All right, Ed, we're happy to see about the ride coming up here and the sponsorship, the partnership with AES Indiana for the Indianapolis 500 and also for the new coach at Butler. Appreciate you squeezing us in today.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
All right, Ed Carpenter joining us on the program. We come back. We talked about Purdue, the guy that is kind of one that puts it all together. Of course, Matt Painter is the guy putting it all together, but you can't do it without a chief lieutenant, and he's got that in Elliot Bloom, who will join us next. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside, which, by the way, is partnered with Purdue Athletics, amongst other places that it's partnered. But Purdue, So what better thing to enjoy tomorrow night while watching the game than a Surfside? Iced tea with a splash of vodka, lemonade with a splash of vodka, half and half, meaning both of them with a splash of vodka, and new blueberry lemonade and new products coming out this summer from Surfside, which you're going to love and are going to be awesome. Just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar, and as I mentioned, no carbonation, so no bubbles, and very smooth and easy to drink. Surfside, look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Ask for the can with the sunset stripes. Please be 21 and please consume responsibly.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
This feels like the montage at the end of literally every movie that probably JMV loved from 84 to about 92. Like the end of the movie, applicable across the board, right? And we'll see what 8 teams after this round work their way into the Elite 8, one step away from the Final Four here in Indianapolis. Do we still have, Eddie, Final Four Fan Fest packs to give away?
Yes, we do. We have them for this week and next week to give away as well.
Which is very cool. The Fan Fest is just kind of a great celebration of the college basketball tournament and a great part of an accentuation to all of the festivities taking place for the Final Four, and we will be giving those away over the course later today and then into next week as well, and we will await to see what teams it is that we have in the Final Four and 2 wins away from that. But you have to take them one at a time. Are the Purdue Boilermakers joining us now on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line? He is in, I believe, his 18th year as the Director of Basketball Operations at Purdue and a return guest to the program, Elliot Bloom, joining us from San Jose. Elliot, I'm guessing 78 degrees and sunny in California. Is that right?
Pretty close. It's a little cooler earlier in the day here, but yeah, yesterday was sunshine and low 80s, high 70s. So, yeah, pretty good living out here in California.
How and be honest here, just in terms of your team, all of the logistics that go into the travel with this and all of it, how are you feeling about everything right now?
I feel pretty good. I mean, most of the hay's in the barn now. Now that we're on site and in the hotel and everything, there's a lot of planning that goes into it ahead of time, and most of the work is done while we're kind of in game mode in St. Louis. I'm kind of working ahead on what it's going to look like for the next week if we're fortunate enough to get through 2 games there, and you kind of start planning ahead, and then once the outcome comes to fruition, you get those wins, then you kind of execute the plan you've put in place. So I always tell people in my role, I'm always kind of working ahead. So like people say like, hey, what time's practice tomorrow? I'm like, I have no idea. I can tell you what time practice is in 2 weeks because that's what I'm working on right now. But you're always kind of trying to stay one step ahead of things.
How does it work in terms of, and I want to get into the team here in a minute, but I think people find, and I know I do, interesting just the backstory of how it all comes together, right? So for example, when you know that you're going to San Jose, who has the ultimate say on when you leave? Does the NCAA determine what day you have to arrive? What all goes into that, Elliot?
Yeah, you're kind of at the mercy of the travel system that the NCAA makes you use. What ends up happening is you know exactly where you're going if you win those games, so you can kind of start ahead of time. They pre-assigned hotels. So we knew that if we were fortunate to get through St. Louis, that we knew what hotel we'd be going to here in San Jose. So you could actually get a little bit of work done ahead of time if you wanted to. But what ends up happening then is the first call I made when we walked off the floor after the win against Miami on Sunday was to the travel hotline that the NCAA gives all the teams. And basically I'm telling them, look, we would like to leave Tuesday, in early afternoon. And you put your request in, and you tell them how many people you're going to have on the flight, and then they get to work finding you a plane and getting that all set up. So we're in a really good advantage at Purdue because we've got a campus airport, one of the few places in the country that's got that, and so we've got a little bit more flexibility than maybe some schools that have to, maybe bus to Indy or bus to another airport across town. So we're in a pretty good situation there, but this year was great. It was very smooth. They came back with the plane as requested, and away we went and landed in San Jose yesterday afternoon. Got over to the hotel, and then you got to line up buses and things like that. You got a lot of hotel meals and rooming lists and all the like of that stuff. And so there's a lot that goes into it. I certainly don't envy those teams that have people going to the tournament for like the first time or the first time in like 10 years or things like that. I was
just going to ask, is it almost advantage? Like, is it a disadvantage to a program that is so caught up in, I think we think to ourselves, man, what if the moment's too big for the players and just the spotlight itself, but all of the logistics of it, can that be the kind of thing that can distract a program away?
1,000%. And I mean, I think that if you have a team that really can lock in on just one game at a time, and a lot of that's cliched talk, right? I mean, it's coaches talk, oh, we're taking it one game at a time. But there's a reason that coaches say that year after year, because that's the best mentality to have, so you're not overlooking anything and you're not getting caught up in the moment. I saw an interview the other day with Coach Krzyzewski on, I don't know what was on Instagram or something, and some guys were asking him, what he used to do with his team. And I thought he made a really good line, and we actually shared it with our team too. It's that when you're a part of March Madness as a player, all of a sudden everybody in your life, you're the conduit to March Madness. So friends, family, former teammates that you played high school ball with, things like that, like you're the superstar now, the rock star, because you're playing in March Madness. And so they all have questions for you. They want to text you and, wish you luck and, hey, how's it going? What are you thinking? And all that stuff. And it's easy to get caught up. All of a sudden you're talking to 20 people about what it's like to be in March Madness. And now you're paying less and less attention to the scouting report and to getting enough sleep and putting your phone down and taking care of your body and all that kind of stuff that goes into being a high major athlete. And so I thought that was really a really good point, because some teams, if they get there, I thought last year, if people remember, we played McNeese State in the second round in Providence. And when they won the game after us, they knocked off Clemson, and they celebrated like they had just won the national title. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, that's good for us, because it feels almost like they're so caught up in a great win, and it was a great win, that maybe they're not going to be as focused for us. Now, whether or not that contributes the next day, who knows? But the teams that, can stay locked in, I think just give themselves a little bit of an advantage.
What is it about? Elliot Bloom is my guest. He is the director of basketball operations for the Purdue Boilermakers. Texas up next in the Sweet 16. Elliot, you're around this team, obviously, every single day. And from the outside, I'll give you the outside thing that I've said on the air as my observation. And that is that it seemed as though, and I understand it, teams go through ebb and flows, and it's a long season. Sometimes guys just get tired of each other. They've been around each other, bickering, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you guys, it all came together in Chicago, and now seemingly through 2 games here in the tournament. Did you feel that there was a rebond, a recoagulation, if you will, of your group here in the last 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it to those who are kind of on the outside or haven't been like a part of a team or something, I think your observation is very astute. I think that we probably hit a point in the middle of the season when we played really good teams, and I think it's bearing out how good the Big Ten is. To have as many teams as we have in the Sweet 16, and for some of these teams to have beaten some of the teams they've beaten to get there, it's proven out that the league has been at a high level all year. And, we come back from a heartbreaker from the West Coast, and then we lose another heartbreaker at home to Illinois, and just kind of started probably losing confidence a little bit. But I think more than anything, just there was probably a feeling like, well, we're probably now it's an uphill battle to win the league. And that's always a goal of ours, year in, year out, because if you can do that, it sets you up for postseason and everything else. And so I think when that kind of goal was realized that was going to be really hard to achieve, I think it kind of put us into a little bit of a funk. And, like you said, it's a long, long season. Teams that looked a certain way in December, if you go back and watch them in February, you could think you're looking at 2 different teams, completely different teams. But I think that there was a sense that with our guys that, at the end of the day, okay, maybe we can't win the Big Ten regular season championship, but there are still a lot of our goals out in front of us. And it was great to get to Chicago. And I think our goal in the Big Ten tournament has always just been just find your rhythm. If you win, great. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. And I don't remember a postseason tournament, conference tournament, having as much tournament implications, NCAA tournament implications as this year. It seemed like across the country there was a lot of outcomes other than bubble teams that had some impact on seeding. And, I think we did find our rhythm in Chicago, and I think it allowed us to get up to a 2 line. And obviously along the way to be able to kind of hang another banner and win another championship for this group was great, and certainly buoyed the confidence of our guys. And then, another little thing is like Braden Smith getting the assist record done and out of the, now that's another thing that's not on anybody's plate to worry about. We can just kind of move on and play. So a couple good things I think happened, to us, and I think in the process allowed our guys to get their rhythm back and their heads up a little bit.
Say a guy to me, Elliot, that has been incredibly impressive over the last year. And I know Braden Smith's a phenomenal player, and his court vision is second to none. Fletcher Lawyer's as good a shooter as you're going to find when he's going. And C.J. Cox has been huge for you guys in stretches. I thought he was huge towards the end of the half against Miami. But I am so impressed from the outside at the unselfish leadership by play and overall maturity of Trey Kaufman-Renn, of being a guy that from the outside looks like is one that says, what do I need to do to win? Not what do I need to do for my team to win? Not for me, not for my team to win. What is it about him, assuming that that's an accurate statement? When did you see that about him? And what was it about him that led you to say, aside from his basketball prowess, that's the character we want at Purdue?
You know, he's probably, I've said this before to others, he's probably as unique of a young man as we've ever had in our program. I mean, he's a philosophy major. You know, it's very common to go down to the training room, you know, an hour before practice when guys are kind of coming in, getting treatment, getting their ankles taped. And he would be just kind of sitting there and maybe eating an apple and getting his ankles taped and like asking people what their opinion on, you know, a historical event or, you know, a philosophy type question. He's just a different guy in the greatest possible way. Very mature, looks at things probably through a different lens. There's a lot of times you could be mid-conversation with him and you have to remind yourself that you're talking to a young college kid instead of a, you know, 40-year-old man. He's just got a really good worldly view, very grounded. You know, in the summer, sometimes our guys get a week here or there where they can, you know, go home and see family and kind of charge their batteries up. We always give the guys like a week around the 4th of July, and then they get some time in August before we get back to school. And I remember asking him, I said, TK, what are you doing this weekend? He goes, oh, just going camping with the grandparents. And I'm like, okay. I go, there's an answer I've never heard before.
Totally normal for a 21-year-old dude, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he went, you know, one of those state parks in southern Indiana. They just kind of went and hung out and did some camping, did some fishing, and that's him. He's just a very he's super complex in how he looks at things, but yet he's just a simple guy. And the selflessness you talked about is very evident. I mean, and I think that kind of goes across the board in our locker room. We don't take ourselves too serious, and if anybody starts getting a big head in our locker room, they're going to be reminded pretty quick that it's really about all of us and not, you know, one individual. That being said, like they're very much champions of each other, and so like all the guys were very happy for Braden. They've been happy for Fletch and the stuff he's accomplished. They've been very happy for TK and all the stuff that he gets, you know, accomplished and stuff. So there's certainly there's a cheerleading that goes on for each other, but at the same time, like, you know, check your ego at the door a little bit when you come in the locker room.
Are you allowed, and I don't know by NCAA rules, Elliot Bloom as the director of basketball ops at Purdue, so I don't want to, maybe I should have asked ahead of time. Are you allowed to comment on a recruit that is committed but not yet arrived on campus?
If he is signed with us, we can. Yeah.
And so my apologies. Has Luke Ertl officially signed with you guys?
Yeah,
okay.
He's signed, and he's on board.
So he is a guy that we just had him on last week. I don't typically have high school players on the show, not in a bad way, but because oftentimes they're not overly loquacious and they're not very insightful. And yet I had him on, and it was the same thing. I thought to myself, wait a minute, I'm talking to a high school kid. This guy sounds like he's 30 years old and getting ready to, you know, go into a courtroom for a case or something as a lawyer. I mean, very intelligent. He's from your high school, obviously, in Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
What about him also do you feel is going to make him a fit for Purdue?
Well, I think a lot of what you just said, I mean, he's wired. It's interesting because when I was when he committed to us, and then I was talking to some people back at my high school and some teachers and admins that were still around that were there when I was there. And some of them were Indiana fans and are Indiana fans. And they said, well, we hate to say this because it pains us, but he is as Purdue as you can get. Like, him and his family are just the salt of the earth people. And there couldn't be a better fit. So I think we've gotten to a point now and been doing this for so long that you kind of know what that means when people say it. And, you know, you probably maybe 10, 12 years ago had to explain that to people. Well, he's a fit of Purdue. What does that mean? You know, it just means he's got a great work ethic and he's willing to come be a part of something bigger than himself. And he's got some toughness to him and he's got some maturity to him. And I think that really describes him. I'm super excited to get him, in the mix this summer and get him going with us. And I know he is too. And hopefully he's another guy that, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years, I'm jumping on this call with you again and talking about him doing some of the same things that these guys have done in our locker room right now.
He did not break the single game Mount Vernon 3-point record, correct?
No, I think somebody. No, he did not. But we've talked about that before.
Okay. Lastly, thoughts on seeing Camden Heidi and overall thoughts on the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, they're super talented. Really good team that I think has kind of come together at the right time. I think they, another great league obviously that they're playing in, and obviously with Coach Miller taking over for the first time. It takes a little bit of time, for him to kind of get his program going and his system implemented and those kind of things. And certainly they're doing it at the right time of year. I think our guys, when we see Cam, it'll be great to say hi and everything. And then, the game will be the game. And, the guys who have left us over the years and gone out to other programs, we catch their games as much as we can. I mean, there's a lot of times that, we'll be coming to practice on a day and people will be like, hey, did you watch Will last night? Did you watch Miles last night? And most of the time the answer is like, yeah, we shot him a text and said good game and things like that. We saw Miles Colvin this year down in the Baha Mar tournament we were playing in the Bahamas, and he hit a game winner in the game before us. And it was kind of a cool moment because all the Purdue fans in the building were cheering him on. And as he came off the floor, our guys were high-fiving him and stuff like that. And we got to watch yesterday. We watched Wilberg at Wichita State playing the NIT, and constantly texting with those guys and just telling them good game, on things like that. So it's a new day and age in college, sports now, obviously, and I think there's probably some old school people that can't fathom that world, but you can sit around and complain and moan about it all you want, or you can just embrace it and just, that's where we're at. And so I think we've kind of chosen to do the latter, and happy for those guys. And it'll be good to see Cam and his family this week.
Well, we certainly look forward to watching you guys play. Should you be fortunate enough to use your words to get out of this round, fortunately, the travel will be a little less arduous in terms of the next round because it would be Indianapolis for the Final Four, but work to do between now and then, and it starts with the Texas Longhorns first and foremost. Elliot Bloom, always appreciate the time, man. Great insight, and we certainly wish you guys the best of luck out west.
Sounds great. Appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate it. Elliot Bloom joining us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. All right, way over. There is a national championship that was won in Indiana, and we will talk to their head coach coming up bottom of the hour. And before that, somebody that was right there on the cusp of a championship with the guy that has now been hired to lead the program with which both of them nearly won one. Matt Howard will join us in just a bit as well.
down low, working on Robinson. Jumps over Glenn. Can't get the shot to fall. Rebound comes down inside to Gary Roosevelt. They had 2 yellow shirts in there. The guy that got the rebound was Carlos Floyd. And here's the slam by Robinson.
Hey, Robinson does run the floor well. Catches the ball well and takes it right to the basket.
I'm amazed at the physique of the 2 tall centers. Isn't that amazing in high school to see that?
Well, one's going to IU. That, of course, is Alan Henderson. Robinson's going to Purdue. So this confrontation you're seeing tonight will continue for the next 4 years.
Not quite for Jerry Baker, because Glenn Robinson would become the number 1 pick in the NBA draft after the most dominant season that I have seen in college basketball, 30 a game for the Boilers. As a junior, Alan Henderson, fabulous career at Indiana, finishing in the top 5 in 6 different categories. But, of course, that was the 1991, the glory days, as we say, state championship game, Gary Roosevelt and Indianapolis Brebeuf with Jerry Baker on the call. Roosevelt would win 51-32 in that game, and Glenn Robinson would cement himself as the Indiana Mr. Basketball. Of course, you could see the stars of today and those that we'll be talking about well after today, the stars of tomorrow. They may go on to college, NBA careers, whatever it may be, in the IHSAA state finals coming up this weekend at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Bar Reeve and Triton in Class A. 2A is Park Heritage and Westview. It is Cathedral and New Haven in 3A, and the 4A title game between Mount Vernon and Crown Point. Luke Ertl, that we were just talking about, the former, or the future, I should say, Boilermaker at Mount Vernon, going to be playing at 8:15 coming up on Saturday. Ticketing information, schedule, all of it, and the history. Great archives that you can read through about the high school tournament at ihsaa.org. That's ihsaa.org.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Thanks again to Elliot Bloom for his time. Already a very busy show today. Talking a little Reds season opener for tomorrow, a little basketball as well. Obviously, Butler with a new basketball coach in Ronald Norred, and one of his teammates at Butler going to join us to talk about exactly that coming up in just a couple of minutes. Marian, congratulations to the Knights women's basketball program winning the national championship, and their head coach is going to join us coming up bottom of the hour. That's a great story because, a group that had some tragedy over the course of the season, put it all together, and now bringing another national championship to the west side of Indianapolis. And then Ed Carpenter joining us a little bit ago as well. He is partnered with AES Indiana with sponsorship on his Slim Fast car. You can't say I'm fast without, or you can't say Slim Fast without I'm fast, right? Isn't that how that goes, Eddie?
That's exactly right, yes. Okay. That's exactly right.
Eddie, you are tomorrow going to opening day Reds and the Boston Red Sox at Great American Ballpark, right?
Uh-huh. Yes, I am indeed.
I'd like to know what do you have like a particular routine you're doing on this? Do you stop in Milan?
This is the first time experiencing Reds opening day for me. So,
and you're traveling with how many people? Excuse me?
One
other person.
Yes.
So yourself and one other person.
Yes.
Okay. And are you going to do like lunch down there? Are you going to just, because they do a whole parade and everything, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what time I need to leave. I should have asked John Sedak that earlier when we had him on the phone.
I don't think you can get there too early, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out, do I leave at 8? Do I leave at 9? I know the parade doesn't start until a little bit after noon. I know, like, there's the banks. They'll have stuff going on starting at 11. So we'll see.
And do you deck yourself out in Reds gear? Do you have a favorite Reds hat, T-shirt? What do you go with?
I will be in Reds attire of some shape or form, yes.
So I have been anxiously awaiting, and I don't know how or why it came to be that it just was sparked in me last year in the postseason where I really got behind the Blue Jays.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as a kid, I mean,
have you completely ditched, hey, root for me?
Listen, I've always here's the funny thing about the Orioles. The cute fella I love the logo of the Cute Fella. And I want to see Cute Fella do well because for that exact reason. Because the Cute Fella's on the hat, and that's all he's saying. He's just saying, he's wearing that hat on the hat, and he's saying, hey, root for me. And when you see it and you hear that in your head, you can't help but root for him, right? But and Blue Jays are a more aggressive bird. You don't want Blue Jays hanging around the bird bath, the bird feed, or any of it. They're a nuisance, and they're very aggressive. They're mean birds. You don't want Blue Jays hanging around, okay? Orioles, on the other hand, I think just good neighbors.
I hear people say that about Cardinal fans too.
Well, that's Cardinals fans. Now, if you really study, if you really get into, is it ornithology? Is that the study of birds? Is that right?
Are you sure it's just not birdology?
It may be. If you're a member of the Audubon Society. Shannon lives on Audubon Road. I shouldn't say that probably, but she does. So a lot of bird watching that goes on, right? And if you study the birds, what you notice is Orioles are very docile, friendly, accommodating, nice birds. And typically the Oriole birdhouse is a really nice, kind of old-looking, old-school, like Camden Yards, right?
Talking about you, or are you talking about Orioles?
Well, both, right? Of course, goes without saying. Blue Jays as birds they're like the neighborhood thugs. You don't want them hanging around. They're coming in, they're looting some stuff, they're wreaking havoc, breaking some windows. Cardinals, if you study birds and you do bird watching, Cardinals are birds, oddly enough, that simply tell you about how they understand bird feeders better than any other bird, and that they have the best history of bird houses better than any other bird. And when they get into the bird bath, they tell everybody else in the bird bath that they understand the movement inside the bird bath better than any other bird. That's what Cardinals are known for doing. But my question for you is, Eddie, tomorrow, because it's opening day, do I wear a red shirt or a Blue Jay shirt? Because I grew up a Reds fan, admittedly, but after Eric Davis and that group went wire to wire in my senior year of high school, it's kind of been all downhill since.
Let's see. Reds play tomorrow. I'm trying to see if the Blue Jays play tomorrow.
I think the Reds
Blue Jays
actually
do not play tomorrow.
Yeah, the
so
Blue
I
Jays
say you
start-
go Reds Thursday, and then you Blue Jays on Friday.
Okay. That's fair. That's what I'll do then. I've got Mr. Redlegs on my shirt. It's a great shirt. Did you say you got a hold of Matt Howard?
Yes, I did.
He's a fellow with two first names, and usually I say you can't trust people like that. Should I ask him if that means he can be trusted?
I'll leave that to you. You're the host. It's your show, Jake.
We'll ask him, but more importantly, we're going to ask him about the new Butler basketball head coach, a guy that he knows a little about, and Ronald Norred. Matt Howard joins us.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
2 o'clock hour underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, the 2 o'clock hour is underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison is the man that selects some of those terrible songs from yesteryear, but they are applicable at times. Like, for example, the Dogs of Butler in the news. Ronald Norred is the new basketball coach. Officially will be announced on Friday, but a guy that played with him and can probably share as much perspective about what kind of a basketball mind will now head the Dogs joins us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. He had many an accolade as a Butler Bulldog during his time from 2007 to 2011, many of which he would go back to his hometown of Connorsville, and I'm sure tell everybody at Mousie's that, in fact, yes, he was an All-American level player at Butler. And Matt Howard joins us on the program. Matt, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing? Hey, Eddie trying to mess with you? Playing that again?
Eddie likes to play songs like Who Let the Dogs Out, which I only permit when we're talking to Bulldogs, right? Now,
no, I love it.
I did tell Eddie, though, and I'm curious if anybody's ever said this to you, I had a phobia for a long time in my life where I didn't think that anybody with two first names was trustworthy. But I feel like Matt Howard's trustworthy, right?
You know, I don't think of Howard as being a first name, but I guess that it is. And yeah, that's a good point. That name, though, is definitely like a 1950s name only, I think.
It is. Howard, you mean? Howard itself?
Yeah, Howard itself is the first name. And you know what's remarkable? I may just be in the wrong areas of the world. I coach quite a bit of, I know this interview is not about me, but I coach a lot of youth teams, and I have not had one Matthew on any of those teams. And I have not heard the name Matthew or Matt on any of the games.
What about Howard? How many Howards are you running across?
So I've run across 0 Matthews. I've actually run across less Howards in that same time.
Fair enough. All right, let's get to this. Here's the best way to say this. Let's go back to when you're playing at Butler, okay? And you're playing in a game in Hinkle Fieldhouse, and you look around and you can kind of figure out that you guys got something going here, and you've got a brilliant head coach, and there's already a legacy there of some March success. But all of a sudden, somebody walks up to you and they say to you, Matt, I'm from the future. And once that you get over that shock, and they say, one of the guys that's on the floor with you right now is ultimately going to end up being the head coach of the Butler Bulldogs after you guys are done playing. Would you guess Ronald Norred?
Yeah, probably. I mean, he just, he was sort of our leader. He was our floor general, the guy that you sort of leaned on and looked to and would look at in huddles and, bring guys together when we're on the floor. And, for the most part, I think you see that anyways in the college game, especially with the point guards, but it's not always that way. But yeah, he definitely was. And yeah, I think I probably would have been so flustered by someone from the future, I wouldn't even been able to think.
Yeah. And especially if the guy's name was Howard, because then you'd know there's no way. You're from the past, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, but what goes into, let's go back to this. When you heard or you were aware, and I'm assuming you were probably well aware of this possibility before the masses, but how much have you stayed in touch with Ronald, and just what aspects of him, what ingredients about him lead you to believe that he can succeed at this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a grind. I mean, as you know, it's not a tough or not an easy thing. It's certainly a tough thing to be a college coach, and especially today where it's all year round, and more so than it used to be. I think they probably would have said it used to be too. But if you were out of the tournament, you weren't recruiting your own players immediately, and they do that throughout the season. But to your point and question, I think he's got a great personality. He's someone that you are naturally drawn to, and you want to be around. He would, for us, was a positive leader, but also like that whole team did. Everybody held each other accountable, and it's the same thing with him. And the guy, he's a winner. He, that's all he cared about. That's all he talked about when we were together. And, so those ingredients are there. And I think, there's going to be some questions, of course, about college experience, but you surround yourself with a good staff, and I'm sure he's working on that now. And that allows you to be successful and sort of learn what you don't know about the college game and apply what you are really good at. And I don't know. I think he'll do a great job.
Your guy's story, Matt Howard is my guest, the former Butler Bulldog. Your guy's story was so good, Matt, because to an element, and you know this, there was such a wholesome nature about it, right? Of here's a group of guys that none of which were necessarily, and you had some really good recruits, and obviously Gordon Hayward grew into an elite level player, and you were a great player, and you played a ton of AAU ball and all that. But it wasn't the world of college basketball that we see today, okay? And it was almost like this last era of innocence of college basketball. Can Butler bridge and marry that quote-unquote Butler way into the era of today of, in Danny Hurley's words, you got to give them the money to compete? How does Butler kind of marry the two together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have asked a lot of people that actually know. I certainly don't. I'm not in the game. I've seen it from a somewhat close view around helping Butler set up their NIL. And by helping, I mean just being maybe a face of it. I didn't know what was going on. But that's absolutely true. But the guys that I really trust that are in the game, they say that you can do that with a little bit less. I mean, it takes a little more work. It takes a little bit of luck, like you said. I mean, our teams were fortunate to get a couple NBA players at Butler. I mean, that makes a world of difference. So from everything that I've been told from people that I really trust, is it swimming uphill a little bit? Yes. But, if you find the right people, that you can build something like that. But it's, to your point, it's incredibly difficult to build a program. The teams that I was on, the teams right before us that build us up to the point of being able to compete for a national championship and just establish that before I even got on campus. You're able to do that because you're able to keep your best players.
When you
and not be worried about,
you're not worried about transfer portal and all that, right?
Yeah, someone offering them more money, and I think it's a legitimate concern.
When you were playing, and I think it was Old Dominion, wasn't it, where you had a putback that kept you guys alive early in the tournament, and then Pitt, you have this miraculous finish. I mean, you had a lot of great moments, right? And not all of them were you covered in blood, which was good too. But when you look back now and you watch the tournament now and you see guys hitting big shots or going to the Final Four or whatever it may be, do you ever have a moment, Matt Howard, where you stop and look at it and go, it almost seems surreal that I was a part of that? Were you aware as it was happening with what was happening?
Oh, no. I mean, when you ask that way, I had no idea really. And especially the first year, you don't really understand, that the first year being the first year we made the Final Four. I mean, once you get past the first weekend, it's just a completely different feel of everything, media, and just the focus on the games. But I mean, when you get to that final weekend, it's literally hysteria. I mean, it's just craziness relative to playing in that first game and the media attention and all the things that you got to do. I mean, it's not something that I think about a lot until March rolls around, and then you're reminded of those things. And we didn't really think anything of it. I think maybe I was ignorant, and I won't speak for my teammates, but I didn't really understand the magnitude of it, and probably because our coaches did such a good job of being like, here's the next task at hand, like here's what we're trying to focus on and really be mindful of. But I had no idea, really, to be honest.
Was there a moment or an experience where you took something or heard something from Brad Stevens where you said to yourself, this guy's different? This is a different level of coaching?
I wouldn't say it was one specific moment, but we had a great coaching staff. So I give credit to them too, and I think he would. But yeah, I mean, he just showed it to you all the time. So even how we practiced and the daily, the day-to-day stuff that we did, and I don't know, back to your question before, I don't know that I really appreciated it until I was gone.
Right.
And then you see, oh, this isn't exactly normal, and I played for some good coaches overseas, and none of them were as good as our coaching staff that we had. And it's, a lot of that, you don't know what you have until it's gone type of thing. And the same for teammates, just like the level of guys and teammates that we had was pretty special. Guys sacrificing to get us to where we got to. I mean, it's, again, you don't really understand it until you take a few steps back from it and are able to see it.
I think, Matt, for anybody who's played a sport and been on a team, sometimes you can look back, and I mean this in a good way, not a bad way. Sometimes you can look back and you understand, or you can then, in retrospect, realize that you had a teammate that was basically the guy that was delivering the coach's message. Maybe the coach wanted to hit, maybe there was a guy on the roster and the coach knew that guy's not going to respond to my word, but if I can get his teammate to get it to him, then he's going to respond to it, okay? And we've all experienced that. Was Ronald Norred that guy at all for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, as much as anybody, I'd say he was, but, I've heard Ron tell this story too, and it's true. Like Coach would yell at Ron to get other people to do things that he wanted to, because he knew he could handle it, but then also he's then conveying that some of that message to us on the court, and he absolutely understood what it took. Like when you're the point guard, also you're sort of in charge of making sure the plays are being run the right way and you're getting people involved and people in the right spots. And so he was a natural, he's a natural person for that. And, you didn't really ask this, but one of the things that I remember really well about him and still laugh about, he wasn't necessarily the best free throw shooter. He wasn't our best shooter by any means. But, when we were in Indianapolis, he had, I think we were up, maybe up one, I think it was, or maybe we were tied, and he hit a couple free throws late against Michigan State. And he just said, he just said, like, hey, when it matters, I'm going to make them. He had this incredible confidence and focus about him. And those are leader type moments.
What will most intrigue you about how he handles this Butler job? And how much interaction do you have with Butler now?
A little bit, but I think to your question, I think what'll be really intriguing is who he surrounds himself with, and I really have no idea. I didn't know that he was going to be the hire either. You're talking about that earlier. I don't know who those guys are, but I think it's a really big deal who that is, or who those people are, and especially because if he operates like I think a lot of coaches do, and even how Coach Stevens did, you put a lot on those people, to make you successful and put the team in the right position and make sure they're giving you the right feedback off the court and on. But man, it's such a big deal today of the people that you're getting and the portal itself, and with that turning on real soon, they've got a lot of work to do.
Can they get them? Can they get them there?
Can
Can Butler get those players?
Well, it depends on who those players are, but what I have heard, Thad and his staff talk about too is it's going to take the right people. You got to get, this this is a situation for a certain type of player. If someone wants the most money, they're obviously not going to go to Butler. If they want to go to a place that hopefully has a special culture and tradition to it, and they want to be a Butler Bulldog, then that's the challenge. I mean, you nailed the start. Now, I think they're probably working overtime right now to see if they can improve whatever that NIL budget is for next year. But it's not easy. I think it'll be interesting to hear what Ron says. I think Friday is they're introducing him, and he and Grant are going to be able to answer those questions a lot better.
Have you spoken with him?
Not yet today. I know both of those guys are swamped.
Pretty busy days, right? Yeah.
They're going to be really busy. So, the last thing they need is another person trying to talk to them. And plus, I literally have nothing. I don't know that I have anything that I can benefit them today.
Yeah, I mean, except for the fact that obviously, great teammate, right? I mean, I wasn't on the floor, but here's the thing, Matt. You don't lay the greatest screen in the history of college basketball to allow a guy to even get off that shot in that moment and hit some of the shots you did down the stretch without being a conscientious teammate. And there's an awareness that goes with that, and I think that never goes away, right?
Well, I'm going to have to backtrack that for you just a little bit. It was almost robotic, just to lay the record straight. We had practiced that exact type of play a few times and actually run it earlier in the year to help us win a game late so that we could have that conference season undefeated. That was something we practiced all the time, and we were sort of fortunate that Gordon got the ball. So, yes, is there an awareness to then turn around and do it live without calling the play? Yes, but in some ways that was like a robot moving around just because I'd run that probably 20 times at least in practices and games earlier in the year.
We're talking about that final shot, by the way, that Gordon Hayward nearly hit, but the screen was unbelievable. I mean, it's the only drawback aside from him missing that shot, but the camera work, unfortunately, understandably so, pans over to see what the shot's going to do. So you kind of miss the screen itself, but it was a brilliant screen, no question.
It seems like every Duke fan that I've met had no problem seeing that screen. They like to tell me that they saw it and it was legal. And it's interesting now that's been 16 years? 16 years, yeah. And there are guys that I'll meet now that, are from all over the country, and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy that set the screen," so I'm remembered for something. Setting the screen, which I love, actually. If there's anything I should be remembered for, I guess it's setting the screen.
You should have a shirt. I set the screen. Everybody will know exactly what it means, right? Exactly what it means. Matt, right. Listen, short notice that we got you today, and I appreciate you making time for us, and we'll see what happens with your former teammate. I think you said it best when you said there's something about Ronald Norwood that, he kind of exudes this positive energy, right? And we'll see how that translates for Butler, but certainly appreciate the perspectives today.
Yeah, that's right. Go Dogs.
Appreciate it. Matt Howard joining us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. There are, I think, in any line of coaching, and any coach that you hear about, I know that, and that's a very interesting perspective there, that Brad Stevens, that Ronald Norwood was the guy that, he would get on Norwood to, hey, you need to get on these guys. And a big part of that, I think, is twofold. Number one, he's the point guard, and that goes without saying. I mean, that's your quarterback, that's your catcher, that's your linebacker, whatever it might be. That's the guy that's the core of the unit. No doubt about that. It's always been that way with point guards. But I also think that great coaches have an understanding. Coaching is about more than knowing X's and O's and knowing the game. I mean, I've been around people that I don't have any doubt that know the game, but I can very easily see that they have no understanding of people. And I think knowing how different players react to different scenario is so important. And John Calipari is a good example. I've always thought John Calipari, he has an it factor about him, maybe not as much today, but certainly at one time. I remember when Calipari first started at UMass and he was getting players to go to UMass, which before that, UMass was known as Julius Erving, and that was it. But Calipari had been an assistant, I want to say, and I could be wrong on this, I don't know whether it was at Robert Morris or Pitt, but Calipari, 5-star basketball camp, was a big camp that Howard Garfinkel ran in the late 80s, early 90s in Pittsburgh. And it was the national camp before Nike camp and all the other stuff that's come along. You weren't anything unless you were at 5-star. And that's where stars were made. And Calipari, because he was an assistant coach in the Pittsburgh area, he was one of the counselors at 5-star. And all these guys started talking about this John Calipari. It's because he had this personality that was larger than life, and that's a huge part of the battle. But using that larger-than-life personality to get players is one thing. Molding players and understanding how to mesh personalities is another. And more importantly, knowing which players are going to respond to criticism, which players need to be coddled, which players can handle a screaming in the ear, which players are going to shell up because of that. That is as big a part of coaching as making it robotic how you set a screen. And the great coaches that you see understand that. And I don't know whether Ronald Norwood will be a great head coach. But I do know that if he was witness to a great coach that understood that he could be the conduit to getting the message delivered to his teammates, that means, number one, that one of the great evaluators of all time in Brad Stevens trusted that in Ron Norwood. And number two, that Norwood, maybe not in the moment, but retroactively, can look back and understand now the importance of the delegation of authority and of request of what needs to be done to win. And that's a key aspect, and we'll see. And I think Matt Howard made a great point there. How do you then complement that with the roster around you? And how do you then, in addition to that, complement it or build it up with the, obviously necessity of NIL money and funding and everything else? But when it comes to coaching, sometimes also you are banding together players that are having to come together because there's a tragedy that's taken place and you need to turn it into triumph. And that's one of the things that took place last night in bringing a championship back to Indianapolis. And there are several aspects about what Marian did that we could all applaud. And we'll do so with their head coach next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
There were a couple of mistakes, I guess, over the season for Marian in women's basketball. After all, they lost twice. They didn't have sand kicked in their face per se, but last night at halftime in Sioux City, Iowa, at the Tyson Event Center, they found themselves down 4, as a matter of fact, to Dort. And they kept fighting till the end, and the third quarter in particular was huge. And as a result, a tremendous congratulations to the women's basketball program at Marian for winning, and this is very impressive, the third title in women's basketball for Marian and the 10th NAIA championship for the school in any sport. And notably, and this is also very cool, 7 of the 10 championships won by Marian and brought back to the West Side were won by female coaches. Santana Anderson is the latest to do so. She is the 10th female head coach to win an NAIA basketball national championship. And, Coach, are you guys still driving back from Sioux City, or are you just now waking up?
No, we're driving on the road back to Indiana.
How's the celebration been? Let's begin with that.
It's been a celebration. Still just does not really seem real. But the kids had an opportunity to celebrate and just embrace what we conquered last night.
You know, I've got a buddy that coined this phrase with a different sporting event, Coach, and I'll let you use it. It's surreal, but it's real, which is exactly what it is for you guys, right? Let's go back to this, and I want to talk about, because we've talked to you before, and I want to talk to you about some of the things that took place with your young women here over the course of the basketball season. But let's go back to last night. You find yourself, here you are in a game where both teams coming in with identical records at 34-2, the national championship, and you're down at the half. And I don't know what it was that was said or what adjustments that might have been made, but you came out of the half and you guys separate yourselves at that point. What was the difference?
The message at halftime was that we knew that we had to come out in the third quarter and win the first 5 minutes. We wanted to get 3 stops in a row, 3 scores in a row, and then also just know that we had to take care of the ball. And with every stop, we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to score.
Madison Bailey led you guys with 23. Abby McNally had 17. You had 3 in double figures. Kenna Kirby had 14 for you as well. But I'm always curious of this. With every team, Coach, there's that glue person. The one that you'll look back 20 years from now and look at that box score and say, you know what? Maybe the accolades didn't come the way of this player, but they executed exactly what they needed to do and didn't worry about any glory or number that comes with it. Aside from those that I just mentioned, who is that player for you?
I would say our glue player is, I would say, Kylie McNally. Kylie just does she works hard and does the little things well. In our postseason, she has really been tasked with guarding the best player on the opposing team. And that, when I say best player, I mean like it could be guard or post. And she stepped up and has done a really good job. And, I've challenged her to, pursue more rebounds and finish around the basket and make her free throws. And she just kind of stepped up to the plate, and Tournament Kylie is a different kid, and she's locked in.
When did you realize, Coach, Santana Anderson is my guest. She's the head basketball coach of the Marian Knights women's basketball team, now the national champion Marian Knights women's basketball team. When did you realize that this was indeed possible? Tell me the moment that maybe you were driving home from a practice or a game and you thought to yourself, I got something special here.
I would say maybe within a few games of the season. I would say I kind of thought that we could really make a run at it. But once we ended, the year 14-0, I really thought like, man, we really have a shot. And so the kids just keep showing up. and buying in, even through even during the 2 setback losses that we had. We didn't let that stop us, define us. We went back to practice, got to work, knew that we fixed some things that we needed to fix, and what we harbored on our entire year is our defense, and our defense has carried us this entire season.
Coach, we talked about this the last time that I had you on, but for those that are unfamiliar with it, you mentioned when I was talking about players that were great players for you. You know, Abby McNally had 17 last night. Her sister Kylie, you said, was a glue player. And we talked about the fact that your job is to coach a basketball team, and your job is to push the right buttons. And you know when young people are coming to campus and living there, you know that for those families, they are entrusting you to be their leader and to look after them for 4 years. These are 2 young women that lost their mother tragically over the course of the basketball season. And I'm assuming that basketball and the family that comes within that locker room is what helped carry them through, and obviously an incredible resolve for them and for your program to keep things focused. Now that you've had a chance to kind of just take a deep breath and see how that all unfolded, what does it say about your young people that they were able to put not just those 2 women, but their teammates as well, to put that all in perspective?
I mean, it just tells me and showed me how resilient and strong group of young women that I get the opportunity to coach. I'm just grateful and blessed that I'm able to coach them. But they are just so resilient. They just the way they rally around each other. They're literally, I would say, as close as sisters. This team. Everybody's just so close on and off the floor, and I think that just helped carry us to the national title yesterday. And then it just, our why was much bigger than ourselves.
You know, when you look at, and I'm sure you've seen these, Coach, the people that, the digital frames, right, that people will put on their desk. And, now that we live in a world where you don't have a photo album, you've got a digital frame and it just is rolled. Every 10 seconds it refreshes a different photo, right?
Yeah.
If you had one of those of this year and you could pause the one photo and say, that right there, that's the moment, that's the image where everything that I want this program to be about is represented right there. And I don't mean when you're cutting down the nets. Was there a moment where you could step back and look back on it in that photo display and say, that's what Coach Santana Anderson and Marian basketball are all about?
When they celebrated and the confetti came down and they all were in the center court hugging on each other and just embracing each other. And, that just I was just standing on the sideline, very proud, just watching them celebrate because after all, they did it. I'm just fortunate enough to be able to just lead them off on the sideline, but their hard work, they have to go out and perform. So ultimately, they did this. And so that was a proud moment for me to just kind of watch them embrace each other and just see their hard work finally pay off.
Well, Coach, here's the thing. The hard work pays off. The celebration continues once you get back to campus. The one thing I do know is this. If you're driving back from Iowa, while I do like the state of Iowa, it's got to be the most boring stretch of road in the United States. So you're probably on 74 right now. I'm going to guess. I like to play these guessing games. I'm going to guess that you guys are approaching Champaign, Illinois, but not quite yet to the Indiana state line. Am I even remotely close?
I don't even know where we are. I can't even tell you.
Listen, I've made that drive enough times that I've thought to myself, I don't even know where I am. I just know that I'm on 74 somewhere, But,
yeah.
And there's probably some celebration going on. We'll let you get back to your team to celebrate it, Coach, but congratulations. I know for Steve Downing and for everybody at Marian, the pride that they must have in what you were able to accomplish and being able to bring a championship back to the west side of Indianapolis. Congratulations on it and certainly enjoy, all right?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Santana Anderson joining us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line with that celebration. Eddie, have you driven from Iowa to Indiana by chance?
I've never been to Iowa.
Really?
No.
I like Iowa. Once again, I have and someday I'm going to do this, and you can tell me if this is the dumbest idea of all time. I might have asked you this a year ago. I've been to all 50 U.S. states. One of these days, I'm going to do some sort of a blog where I rank them 50-1 based on, and just tell like a little anecdote of something cool that happened or fun that happened or unique that happened or somebody I met or a cool place that I went. I don't know if I should be flattered by this or not, but this morning when I was at the event with Ed Carpenter, another individual of the ECR team came up, and Ed Carpenter introduced me by saying, "This is Jake, the guy that visits all the weird cemeteries." Now, I don't know if I should have been like impressed by that or offended by that, but
both. Impressed that they knew that, offended that's how the intro was.
Right. But everywhere that I've been, every state that I've been, I've had at least one experience. I've visited one mom and pop cafe. I met one super interesting person. I heard one heartwarming story in every state that I've been to but one. There's one state that there just is not a single memorable thing. I'm not saying that bad stuff has happened there, but this state is like that rainy Sunday in January where there's nothing going on and it's 22 degrees outside and sleeting, and you sleep until noon, and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to remember a thing about today. There's one state, and that would be my number 50. And I probably, now, if I'm doing this blog and I'm ranking them, Eddie, do you think it would be more strategic from the click standpoint to start with the best state first and then go down to 50, or to start with number 50, this is the worst, and rank it down to number 1?
You got to go 50-1.
Okay. Because number 50 is the easiest pick of them all. And number 1 is as well. And I would probably take Indiana out of the equation because there's a bias. But if you're Iowa is beautiful. Eastern Iowa is very hilly, gorgeous. Western Iowa, bunch of corn, but made right sandwiches are there as well, which are very, very good. But I congratulate Marian on that. That's an awesome, awesome accomplishment. We had a really active and busy show today. We'll come back and kind of put a tie on all of it and get you previewed for what is going on tomorrow. We'll also find out what John's got going on as part of the crossover, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141. We'll check in with John in just a bit.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
J&V is at one of his favorite spots. We'll catch up with him here in just a moment. Hey, Jake, isn't Ronald Norad just the 2026 version of Laval Jordan? We'll see. I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that. I think Jordan probably is a decent coach, but again, it's hard. It's hard to know how much of that is lack of resource, how much of it is who knows. I mean, Thad Matta won 500 games, been to a pair of Final Fours, won 60+% of his games. And, I wouldn't say it was a failure at Butler, but it wasn't overwhelmingly dynamic during his tenure there because what did Danny Hurley say? Sometimes it's about the Jimmies and Joes as much as the X's and O's. And you got to have resources. Got to be able to get the pieces. And that's going to be one of the things that we shall see whether or not they're going to be able to do exactly that. Eddie, tomorrow will be in Cincinnati for opening day. Did you say we have John, Eddie?
Yep.
J&V joining us from Joe's Grill, Joe's Bar and Grill. John, you got a big one lined up today, right?
Yep. I'm at Coach's Tavern downtown. Joe's Grill's tomorrow. Yeah. You're a day in front. That's all right. It's all good.
I was thinking about opening day.
No, it's all good. Coach's Tavern, Tommy S.'s place on this Wednesday downtown because we have Lakers Pacers later on tonight. Hey, Jake, I didn't want to ask you this. When somebody asks you, is this just like 2.0 Laval Jordan, what if it's Brad Stevens?
Right.
Why can't it be Brad Stevens? I think that I hate to reference it, but that's a dumbass comment. You don't know anything yet, do you? People thought Brandon Miller might be Brad Stevens 2.0,
right?
And he wasn't. So you got to trust who's making the hire.
Anytime you have a former player that is getting his first opportunity as a head coach, I guess you automatically associate it with the last former player that, although it wasn't his first opportunity as a head coach, Laval Jordan, right? He had coached elsewhere. So, yeah, I don't disagree.
To be by far the best on the list. Jake, that's the best on the list, the most logical. And you and I talked about the Carolina list last night. There's not really anything. I love Dusty May, you know that. But if I'm Dusty May, I stay in Ann Arbor. There's not too much on that list that really piques your trip in the light, fantastic interest there, does it?
When we were talking about North Carolina last night, John, and that conversation began with both you and I almost like stumping one another, trying to think of who would be a Carolina-affiliated guy, right? And then I got to thinking about it more, and I thought, okay, so the guys that would be the natural next in line great coach, most of them you would think to yourself, but why would you give up where you are to go to the pressure cooker that is Carolina, especially in today's world when you have the turnover of roster? So then I wondered if they don't end up with kind of like a Steve Alford hire at UCLA, where it's like, yeah, he's fine, but that it was the sixth choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And listen, it's going to be tougher and tougher to want to come back from the NBA or want to get involved in what you're doing in college basketball unless that you're up and coming and you're young and you have all this injury to jack around with all this stuff. Because not a lot of these dudes any longer, as we've noticed, especially the older versions of these dudes, really want to jack with that anymore, Jake.
Who would you put, if you had to pick right now, you got to write a name in an envelope.
Yeah.
And if they end up there, you're going to get $1 million. North Carolina coach, who do you pick?
Oh, man. Is Ryan Odom still on the list from Virginia? I know that's within conference, but
I kid you not, that's exactly who I was going to say. That's exactly who I was going to say.
Well, I don't think it's going to be Josh Schertz. I don't think Dusty would have any – would he have interest? Hey, great, I'm glad you have interest in me, but I think he's just fine in Michigan where he is. Jawad Williams, we talk about that. Who else? Tommy Lloyd would make the most sense, but if I'm Tommy Lloyd, I got a good thing going, much like I mentioned about Dusty in Michigan. You got a good thing going in Arizona.
Well, and
so you go from some place where you got not a lot going on to a place where you got everything going on around you. So
I think listen, one of the best coaches in the country might be T.J. Otzelberger at Iowa State, but he's rooted there. His wife's from there. Not from there, but went to school there, I think, or coached there. I mean, he wants to be there, which is half the challenge there, right? McCollum? McCollum, would he leave Iowa?
No, I would say, and Odom has at least ACC roots. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we lean that direction anyway, right?
Yeah,
because of family and all that. Because the ACC roots that are there.
Yeah, from the area. Yeah,
right.
But all right, so the area of coaches, which is right across from Gamebridge tonight, it's the Lake Show. What's on the big program tonight?
Chris Kramer, former Boilermaker guard, 5 o'clock hour, Sweet 16 tomorrow in San Jose with Purdue and Texas. We'll talk to Chris about that. Lance McAllister, the big one, over in Cincinnati, opening day tomorrow. And James sent it out. I forget what else is on here today, but something else is on here. So whatever.
Well, and you also get to be at one of the
I forgot.
You're at one of the best
Kevin
spots
Bowen. I'm sorry. Kevin Bowen. Kevin Bowen is on the show today. My fault, Kev. I conveniently forgot about Kevin Bowen coming on the show. And Tommy S. My good friend Tommy S. is ready to rock with me right here. I'm already cutting through like a couple of beers, Jake. I'm going to be primed by 4 o'clock here, brother.
Okay.
Let me tell you.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Tommy's got
there's not one damn thing wrong with it. None. Zero wrong with it.
All right, John, we'll throw it out to you to take over here in just a minute.
You got it, bud.
All right, J&B joining us on the program. So, Eddie, you are on your way to Cincinnati tomorrow. Do we know what's lined up on the big program tomorrow?
Ball State's new head coach will join us tomorrow at the program, 12:45. Maybe some Tony East action tomorrow, Jake, and we'll work on some other stuff as well. Purdue, Texas preview, obviously, with it being game day.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. And by the way, if you did not hear it earlier, I thought Elliot Bloom's always really good. That's one of the better, I just think, really good perspective. And especially, I found it fascinating when he was talking about the challenges of the logistics and the travel and the distractions that come with the NCAA tournament and those things that they deal with and just how they deal with it and a lot of different things that he had. That conversation will be up on the website at 1075thefan.com. Shannon had jury duty today. I don't know whether or not she has been picked for a jury. I don't know if she's been sequestered. I don't know if she's going to the game tonight, but I'll be at the Lakers game. I don't know if Shannon will be there with me or not. We'll find out whether or not she's doing her
Do you want her sequestered?
Civic duty. Just party up on Audubon, right? We'll be back with you noon tomorrow. Eddie will be in Cincinnati. I think Don't Call Me Atticus Finch will be in, and we'll talk to you then. Thank you for listening to Query & Company.